Chapter 1022. But my magic power can continue to grow through practice, and there's no limit to the number of times I can advance, right? Lightning did not look frustrated at all. That's great. It's exciting to be able to surpass one's own limits. Also, I can be considered as half a combat witch now. Combat coup. Maggie echoed with her head held high. I know you're happy, but remember not to speed up over the castle and cause trouble for His Majesty next time. Vendi coughed twice. Also, you have to save your magic power for the next few days, until all the tests are completed. Do you understand? Yes, Sister Vendi. Lightning playfully stuck out her tongue. Roland had a different opinion. Although supersonic flight could give Lightning unparalleled mobility, once she ran out of magic power, she could easily fall into a desperate situation. Moreover, Lightning was much smaller than an airplane, so it was still unknown how much damage she could cause to the demons when she broke through the sound barrier. It was obviously not cost-effective to use her as a combat witch. As for the magic slayer who could disrupt magic power in a wide range, he was even more of a nemesis to her. What Roland cared more about was the time she could last at subsonic speed. In this era, a speed of 800 or 900 kilometers per hour was definitely a speed that left others in the dust. Whether it was to explore the map or to serve as a scout, it was much more efficient than a simple battle to cover up the battlefield's blind spots outside Sylvie's detection range. Just as Lightning was about to leave, Roland suddenly stopped her. By the way, I have one more question for you. He considered his words carefully. If, after more than 10 years, there are no more dangers to explore in this world, what will you do? No. Dangers to explore? Lightning was slightly startled. For example, every continent has been set foot on, every sea is recorded in detail, the entire world is visible, and there is no place that can be called unknown. It may sound unbelievable, but if that were to happen, would you still want to be an explorer? I see. The little girl suddenly understood. You mean what if the explorers at the fjords explore the land and the sea during the Battle of Divine Will? What should I do? Ere you can understand it that way. Roland couldn't help but curse inwardly. He had already said it tactfully enough, but the other party still hit the nail on the head. Sure enough, people of the same trade were the biggest enemies. Unless every one of them is as powerful as my father. But even so, I will continue to explore, Lightning said without hesitation. Because there are some places that only I can reach. Even my father can't do it. You mean? Lightning pointed to the top of her head and said confidently, there's still a big blank space in the sky. It wasn't until she left that Roland couldn't help but laugh. Should he say that they were indeed father and daughter? Her reply was not only similar to Thunder's, but it was even more imposing. He did not know if the fate of an explorer would be as Thunder had said, but he was right about one thing. In terms of talent, Lightning was indeed at a level that ordinary people could not reach. What are you laughing at? Nightingale asked curiously. He stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked at the cloudy sky. His eyes seemed to penetrate the clouds and reach a deeper place. Although it was still elusive, someone was already watching it. I'm laughing. How good it is to be young, he sighed. After dealing with Lightning's matter, Roland asked Vendi to stay. I plan to add a new department to the city hall. He went straight to the point. In addition to handling emergencies like today's, it can also provide a credible channel for the public to discuss. You mean it's mainly used to release information? Vendi asked. Yes, this department will be called the Publicity Department. Roland nodded. But the way it releases information is a little different. First of all, unless it's an emergency, it won't make an announcement through the bulletin board in the central square. Second, it won't be limited to Neverwinter. It will also include some novel events that happened in other places. If we don't publicize it in the central square, how will we let people know? Nightingale curled her lips. Roland picked up a piece of scrap paper from the table and unfolded it in front of the two. So it needs a new means of publicity, the newspaper. In fact, setting up a bulletin board in the central square and sending people to repeatedly publicize it was a last resort. In the early days, the literacy rate was extremely low, so it was impossible to have all the people read. Under such circumstances, Word of mouth became the only way to publicize the decree. However, with the rapid expansion of the city's population and the rapid expansion of the territory, this method could no longer keep up with the actual needs of the people. In the past, gathering 3,000 people to make a speech was equivalent to informing the whole city. Now, to meet the same proportion, at least 80,000 to 90,000 people had to be gathered. Not only did this exceed the capacity of the central square, but it would also cause the industrial operations of Neverwinter to come to a halt, due to such a large number of people. Barev's report made him realize that the saying, "If you don't occupy the propaganda position, the enemy will occupy it," was not just a saying. Without a reliable channel of discussion, all kinds of rumors would ferment in the taverns, and when they spread, it would be difficult to reverse them. Now that the universal primary education had been carried out for 2.5 years, the resources at Neverwinter's disposal were much more abundant than in the past, so it was only natural to start a newspaper. If the former was the foundation of running a newspaper, then the latter was a strong guarantee of the newspaper's circulation. What did an official newspaper need? In order to maximize the circulation and timely report that could guide public opinion, Neverwinter needed a large amount of paper and efficient printing technology. The problem of paper was easy to solve. In the developed central and eastern cities, paper had been popularized among the middle and upper class families. He still remembered that Lucia's late parents used to run a paper mill in Valencia. According to the statistics of City Hall, among the immigrants from the eastern region, there were many craftsmen who had mastered paper-making technology. As long as he recruited those craftsmen and expanded the production capacity, he would be able to meet the demand for a large number of publications. For Neverwinter, any problem that could be solved with money was not a problem at all. Printing was even easier. Metal type and roller were all mature technologies, and the ink was provided by Dark Cloud. In theory, it was easier than paper-making. However, he did not need to explain all these to Vendi in detail. Putting aside the technical aspect, the newspaper had to be written by people, so the most important thing was to find people who could collect information. Roland asked Vendi to stay because he wanted her to pick a few suitable candidates. Whether it was the Witch Union or the Sleeping Spell, she should be the one who knew the abilities of the sisters the best. "I think I understand." After listening to Roland's explanation, Wendy thought for a moment and said, "So you need a witch to participate in this matter, and she can not only find out the incident in the first place, but also run faster than anyone else and send the news back to the publicity department as soon as possible." Ahem, it's not necessary to run fast. He almost choked on his saliva. As long as she knows where the incident happened, she can send someone else. Chapter 10:23. Honey was very happy to be called into the office. As soon as she entered, she looked around the mahogany table, as if trying to see through it. "What's wrong?" Roland asked curiously. "Is there anything special about this table? Did you put a treasure in it?" Honey even came close to the table and sniffed it. "Or does it have other functions, such as automatically heating up at night? How is that possible?" He laughed. "This is just an ordinary desk, and there are only documents and official letters in it." "Oh really?" Honey asked suspiciously. "Then why does Sister Nightingale lie at the table for a long time every night?" "Well, what?" Roland and Vendi were stunned, while Nightingale bounced up from the recliner. "When I trained Grey Hair, he told me, although he could only express it with his movements." Honey replied solemnly. "Sister Nightingale always sits in your seat when no one is around, and puts her face on the table." "Oh." Before she could finish, Nightingale flashed over and covered her mouth tightly. I was just a little sleepy, so I leaned against the table for a while. Besides, how could a bird know what I was doing? You've completely misunderstood its meaning." Vendi held her forehead helplessly. "Ahem." Roland coughed twice. "Maybe Grey Hair saw it wrong? After all, it's dark at night." Honey mumbled in Nightingale's palm. "Grey Hair is an owl." There was a brief silence in the office. "Anyway, just pretend that you saw it wrong." Roland cleared his throat and waved at Nightingale, whose face was flushed. The latter stamped her feet and directly disappeared into the fog, completely hiding herself. It seemed that she would not show up for a while. Really? I see. Honey did not ask further. If a table can heat up, I would have wanted one. Why? Roland raised his eyebrows. Isn't there heating in the castle and the witch building? But there's no one in the garden. If Sister Leaf isn't there, it's hard to warm up there. Recently, Gray Hair and the others don't want to move. I'm afraid that they'll catch a cold, so I built a platform under the olive tree and hugged them to sleep. If the tables could be warmed, they would be more comfortable. Was that why she was so interested in his desk? Roland noticed that Honey's fluffy curly hair still had a few feathers stuck to it. At first glance, it looked like an untended grass nest. He found that he had indeed neglected the living environment of those animal messengers. He subconsciously thought that they had the ability to adapt to nature, but he did not consider that letting them move in the wind and snow during the months of demons was already against the laws of nature. Although the table can't heat up, I'll have someone build a fireplace in the garden. He smiled and gestured. It's about the size of a bed, and can gather all the animals you train together. What do you think? Really? Honey's eyes lit up. Thank you. It's nothing. But can you really talk to them? Honey scratched her head in embarrassment. In fact, as Sister Nightingale said, most animals can't speak, so they can only imitate what they see with simple movements. It's common for them to guess wrong, so it can't be counted as a real conversation. So that's how it is, Roland thought. Although magic can make tamed birds and beasts obey Honey, it can't give them human-like intelligence and turn them into another species. What if you just let them find something interesting and then tell you where to go? Something interesting? Honey showed a thoughtful look. Just as Roland was thinking about how to explain the meaning of the word news, she suddenly said, Sister Vendi and Teacher Scroll often get together to drink. Whenever they get drunk, they lie on the balcony and sing. Is that interesting? There's such a thing? Roland could not help but be surprised. As the head of the Witch Union, Vendi was gentle and kind, and always gave people a feeling of a spring breeze. As for Scroll, as the Minister of Education and also the teacher of the primary course for witches, she was full of patience and intellectual beauty. Although she usually did not smile, she was very attentive to the witches in the Witch Union. It was really hard for him to imagine that these two would also get drunk, and according to Honey, it seemed that it was more than once. Why have I never heard them sing? Because they usually only meet when you are on the battlefield. After all, when Sister Nightingale is not there, it is convenient for them to drink her drinks, said Honey. Besides, they don't just sing. Greentail told me that sometimes they also talk about you. This time it was Vendi's turn to cover her mouth. I'm just happy for your Majesty's achievements. Besides, she also said that birds can't talk, so how can they understand what we are talking about? Greentail is a parrot. Honey said with puffed cheeks. Seeing that the room was about to fall into silence again, Roland quickly stood up and said, Well, this is indeed an unusual and interesting thing. You pass. Pass? Honey asked in confusion. Wait, Your Majesty, I suddenly feel that it may not be suitable for her to be the center of the publicity department. Vendi coughed. Rest assured, all the articles will eventually be reviewed before being published. Besides, the content of the newspaper is mainly about the public affairs, and there won't be too many involving witches, Roland said decisively. Besides, ordinary people can't enter the castle district, so you don't have to worry about this. After all, only her animal messengers can quickly obtain news from all over the world. Your Majesty, may I know what exactly you are talking about? Honey raised her hand and shouted. Of course. Roland held back his laughter and tempted her step by step. This is a very interesting job. Come to me, and I'll explain it to you in detail. Now that he had established the information center and finalized the technology to run the newspaper, the next step was to recruit staff and establish an interview writing system. Barav was undoubtedly the most suitable person to be responsible for this part of the work. As for the position of the minister, he decided to temporarily take it on himself. Considering the degree of acceptance of the public, the newspaper would initially only be published in Neverwinter once a week. In addition to the major events that happened in various places, there would also be some pages to record civil news and trivia. Coupled with the official background of the city hall, Roland believed that it would soon become the most credible publicity channel, which would greatly improve the current lack of publicity. At the same time, it would also provide rich topics for the public in the tavern to talk about, thereby squeezing out the gossip from the market. However, these were only the things that were recorded on the surface. What he was more interested in was the second half of what Honey had to say when she was stopped. Of course, he did not have to be in a hurry. If he became the minister, he could summon Honey alone in the future and ask her about the secret and interesting things. For example, what on earth did Vendi and Scroll talk about when they were drunk? Chapter 1024. Victor sat in a private room of a tavern in Neverwinter, looking through the recent trade bills. Unlike the noisy hall downstairs, this was undoubtedly a high-end room. The floor was covered with a woolen carpet, and there was a fireplace under the soft couch. From the moment he entered the room to the moment he laid down, his feet would not feel cold at all. According to his request, the innkeeper also added a movable wooden table next to the couch. It would not hinder him from resting, and it could be used as a short table when needed. Especially in the winter when the wind and snow were howling, it was a kind of enjoyment to do business while sitting on the couch. At this moment, there was a plate of golden chicken breast slices on his left, and a cup of dark purple chaos drink on his right. Regardless of the taste, this meal alone was worth 10 golden dragon. As a jewelry merchant on the surface, but in fact, he was the fourth son of the Lothar family. These expenses, which were considered huge in the eyes of ordinary people, were nothing to him. Spending a sum of golden dragon to let himself enjoy the comfort brought by wealth had become a subconscious action, and he did not consider whether it was worth it or not. Since 2 months ago, after visiting the first show of the giant machine called Train, he bought a room on the 3rd floor of this tavern and made it his business base. Of course, with his wealth, it was not difficult to buy 1 or 2 properties, but Victor preferred this kind of feeling, being in a tranquil and yet able to feel the hustle and bustle of the lower level. Compared with the traditional big houses favored by the nobles, he always yearned for places like taverns. It was not only for the convenience of business negotiations with various caravans. If there was anything that could directly reflect the vitality and prosperity of a city, then it must be the taverns located in the downtown area. After turning the last page, Victor closed the sheepskin book in his hand and picked up the crystal-clear drink. Under the illumination of the candlelight, the purplish-red liquid was like a beautiful gem. Recently, there was a little trouble with the bill. That was, he had not received raw gemstones in the western region for a long time. The battle for the throne had changed the situation in Grey Castle greatly. The city had been destroyed by the flames of war, and the nobles no longer had their own fiefs. These changes had caused the prices of luxury goods to fall again and again. If they wanted to maintain their original profits, they had to increase their sales. But if there were no raw stones, the jewelry craftsmen under him would not be able to produce gems. Longsong's stronghold used to be a large source of raw stones for him. But after Roland Wimbledon announced the establishment of Neverwinter, the source of raw stones became increasingly scarce. He had visited the Longsong area several times and found that all the mines there had been taken over by the young king. This was not surprising, as it was the nature of a lord to amass wealth. What was strange was that the mines seemed to disappear into thin air after they were transported to the border area. Yes, he had not found a single jewelry store in Neverwinter. They could either sell the raw stones for a profit or invest a sum of money to make gems for a profit. There were only 2 ways for a lord to do this. If it was the former, he could earn the price difference, and if it was the latter, he could work together to sell. Whether it was the sales channel or the further processing into jewelry, he had the strength that the other party could not refuse. But the king did not even leave him a way to intervene. It was as if Roland Wimbledon did not intend to make money with gems at all. This made Victor a little distressed. He had also tried to sell the jewelry he made in Neverwinter, but the result was the same. No commoner in any place could afford such expensive goods that cost dozens of golden dragon. They had always been supplied to the rich aristocratic families to satisfy their need to show off and compare at banquets. But there was no aristocracy in the traditional sense here. That's right, for such a huge new city to have no interest in jewelry. This was something he had not expected. He had come to Neverwinter many times, but he had only bought goods here and rarely sold them. The accounts in the sheepskin book were one-sided. This was undoubtedly an unhealthy sign. The appearance of the train had made Victor realize that the future had come, but it was not evenly distributed. In order to better expand his business, he naturally had to go to the place that was closest to the future. It was also an inevitable choice for him to shift the focus of his business from the old King City to the new King City. The problem was, what should he do without this industry in the future? He was not short of money. Even if he did nothing, he could still enjoy a rich life. But he had to prove his ability in the trade, so that those businessmen who coveted his family and black money would be speechless. He could not let his father down. Just as Victor was thinking about how to solve this problem, the noise downstairs suddenly became several times louder, and even the floor trembled slightly. It was still early, so it should not be the time for the drinkers to enjoy themselves. Did something happen? He pulled the bell to call the maid. "Excuse me." Soon, a beautiful woman pushed the door open and walked in. "What can I do for you?" The moment the door opened, the noise suddenly became louder. He seemed to hear someone reading something loudly. Victor pointed outside the door. "What's going on downstairs?" "Sorry, sir. Did they disturb you?" The maid smiled apologetically. "It can't be helped. After all, today is the day the newspaper is on sale. Everyone is rushing to buy it." "Newspaper?" he repeated awkwardly. "Yes, His Majesty issued an announcement a week ago, saying that it will replace the bulletin board in the square. Everyone has been looking forward to it for a long time. They all want to see what the newspaper is. Oh, another new thing?" As expected of the new King City, Victor suddenly became interested. "How much is it? I heard that one copy is 10 bronze royals." "Buy one." "No, buy 10 copies for me too," he said immediately. "Yes." Not long after the maidservant ran down the stairs, she quickly ran back, panting, My lord. All the newspapers that were delivered have been sold out." "So fast?" Victor blinked in surprise. If it was a commodity, it was too easy to sell. But this was not a problem for him at all. It was just throwing money. Then buy it from the people who bought it. Money is not a problem. He threw a golden dragon into the maid's arms. "As long as you can buy it, the rest is yours." "Yes, sir. Milord," the girl said with a smile. Half a quarter of an hour later, 6 stacks of gray newspapers were handed to him. "The price below has risen to 20 silver royals. I've tried my best." The maid stammered. Is she raising the price because someone is buying a lot? The maid's expression clearly revealed her inner thoughts. Although she did not complete the task, she was reluctant to hand over the rest of the money. Victor did not care. "What's your name?" "Ling Long, sir." "Keep the money." He waved the newspaper in his hand. "By the way, can you read this with me?" Since he already had good food and wine, what he lacked was self-evident. The maid's chest was heaving up and down, and the fine sweat on the tip of her nose exuded a youthful aura. Roland had seen many noble women, and this slightly clumsy girl had a unique flavor. Moreover, she was a resident of Neverwinter. If there was anything he did not understand, he could ask her. "Sir Victor." The maid lowered her head, blushing. After a while, she bit her lip, nodded and replied in a low voice, "I do." Chapter 10:25. With one more person on the couch, the cushion suddenly bent a lot and made a soft creaking sound. "It seems that I have to remind the innkeeper to strengthen this thing," Victor thought. Although the big bed was placed in the corner of the room, sometimes not everything could be done on the bed. Changing places often brought unexpected beauty. Compared to the 2 king cities, the tavern here was still lacking in heritage. After a while, Tinkle had cleaned up the drinks and spread the newspaper in front of him. "This is..." Victor could not help but raise his eyebrows. He saw that the paper was neatly covered with small words, just like the ancient books in his house. Since he was young, he had thought that his vision was extraordinary. Not only had he seen most of the strange things in the world, but he had even played with them himself. Usually when a product was placed in front of him, he could roughly estimate its value. However, this thing made Victor hesitate. Such neat and detailed handwriting was unlikely to have been written by hand. In other words, it was highly likely that it had been imprinted. Considering the cost of the latter, the creator would usually only use it on important and rarely modified files and classics, such as the kingdom's code of law. This was where the problem lay. In order to achieve the best effect, these kinds of books would use the best materials possible. Unshaven lambskin was only a basic requirement. Many of the covers were inlaid with gold and jewels. This was to highlight the extraordinariness of the book and ensure its durability. But what was this newspaper? The paper was obviously ordinary gray papyrus. It was of different thickness and melted when it touched water. It had no cover, and the corners were not protected. Even if it was read normally, it could not be read more than a few times. To him, this was like stuffing a luminous pearl into an iron ingot. Victor could not help but think of what the maid had said before. The king intended to use this thing to replace the announcement. Did that mean that it would print new content in the future? After asking the question in his heart, he got an affirmative answer from the maid. Yes, the announcement said that the newspaper would be published every other week, and the number would only increase. It was guaranteed that most people would be able to read it. And one copy only cost 10 bronze royals. He began to doubt how much wealth His Majesty had plundered from Hermes. How could His Majesty want to continue doing this for a long time when he would lose money every time he made a fortune? The gemstone merchants who had previously thought that there might be a business opportunity here had now completely dispelled the idea. Who cares? Victor muttered to himself. I'm not spending my money anyway. What does it have to do with me whether the other party wins or loses? It was better to concentrate on reading the newspaper. With this in mind, he shifted his gaze to the first page. At the top of the page was a bold headline, Grey Castle Weekly. The following pages were about the king's ascension to the throne, and the alliance between the Kingdom of Dawn and Grey Castle to fight against the demons. He had already heard about these things, but he only knew that there were such things. After just 2 lines, Victor was completely immersed in it. The content made him feel like he was holding his breath. It was the first time he had seen such a detailed description of these 2 major events from the perspective of the higher-ups. Different from the rumors circulating on the streets, the records in the newspaper not only contained the precise time and place, cause, process, and result, but also elaborated on the reasons for their occurrence. Especially the part about the alliance between the Kingdom of Dawn and the Kingdom of Dawn. The betrayal of the Moya royal family, the rebellion of the nobles, and the letter for help that was sent from thousands of miles away. All of these eventually formed the reason for Grey Castle to send troops. After that, the 3 big families changed sides, and the new King of Dawn was willing to rebuild the kingdom with Roland Wimbledon as the leader. Although he knew that these descriptions were not necessarily true, he found himself unconsciously wanting to believe them. For no other reason than that the content was so complete and seamless that it was hard not to believe it. In fact, the fact that the other party dared to put these things in front of him was already convincing enough. For a moment, Victor ignored the existence of Tinkle and could not wait to turn to the next page. The content of the second page was actually related to the demons. The author had written a complete record of the First Army's expedition to the Northwest Wasteland before the beginning of winter, and their attack on the demons, using days as units. This was the first time he had heard of this news. When he came back to Neverwinter last time, he only knew that there were devil beasts attacking the border, but he did not expect that the king would retaliate for this. Not only did the king go deep into the rumored dangerous forbidden land, but he also dealt a heavy blow to the demons, so that they did not dare to easily appear in the western region anymore. If the record was true, this could almost be described as legendary. How could such a thing happen? This was the thought that came to Victor's mind the most. Whether it was the long-distance raid in the past half a month, or the life-and-death battle 10 kilometers away, both were thrilling. When he saw the army forming a defensive position to resist the waves of enemies from the sky, he even felt a chill run down his spine. Since he had been exposed to black money since he was a child, he knew better than most people that this world was not as simple as people thought. In the dark, there were many hidden forces that did not know their place. Therefore, When the news of the demon's appearance reached the Kingdom of Dawn, he was not too surprised. The leaders of the Chamber of Commerce were probably the same. But that was all. The nobles and merchants of the Kingdom of Dawn still focused on their own interests, and did not care about the battle of divine will, which was only on paper. Victor never expected that Grey Castle would have a head-on conflict with them, and even win. This gave him an inexplicable feeling. He could not tell what it was, but it made him feel at ease and happy. This matter should not have had anything to do with him. After thinking about it, he guessed that the word human, which appeared many times in the newspaper, had influenced him. For a moment, Victor felt that he was on the same side as the First Army of Grey Castle. In the face of the terrifying and powerful alien race, the barrier between the family and the bloodline seemed to have faded a lot. He took a deep breath, licked his slightly dry lips, and turned to the third page. The content of this piece of paper was much more relaxed. It was all about the trivial things that happened in Neverwinter, and the titles were also quite novel. For example, shocking. Where did the late-night explosion in the city come from? The detective group will uncover the mystery. Water pipes cracked and the road became a skating rink. The bird beak mushroom cooking guide that Neverwinter people must know, and so on. Victor continued to read. When he flipped to the back of the newspaper, he was suddenly stunned. It was a black and white painting that took up half of the page. The scenery in it was so vivid that it was difficult to look away. Two women were holding hands and standing quietly on the snowfield. Together with the fluttering snow. They were incomparably beautiful. Below the painting was a row of beautiful words. Chapter 1026. What's this? Victor pointed at the picture and asked, "Is it a new play?" Tinkle leaned over and glanced at the newspaper. "No, sir. This picture should be referring to the magic movie." Magic movie? It was another term that he had never heard of. It was great to be in the future. The jewelry merchant could not wait to ask, "Can you explain it to me in detail?" The maid was a little embarrassed. "Well, I'm not sure. A few days ago, the same picture was hung in the central square, but it was colored. I heard that the magic movie is a new kind of performance, and even requires a special stage to watch it. An art that transcends the times? How confident the King of Grey Castle is to use such a word to describe it." Victor stroked the slightly rough paper and thought, "It seems that this thing is really worth looking forward to." He noticed that there were a few lines of smaller words below the big words, which stated the time and place of the performance and the way to buy tickets. Then Victor's heart skipped a beat. Wait. The ticket costs 40 golden dragon? Did I read it wrong? This is more than the price of the top theatrical troupe in the city of Glow. It was not that he could not afford it, but why would anyone in a city where no one even cared about jewelry would be willing to pay for a magic movie? No, there's more. Victor frowned and continued to read. At the same time, he could not help but read in his heart. If you have a Neverwinter ID card, you can get a special discount. You can book the Neverwinter Hotel for only 25 silver royals. Note: the original price is better, but the number of times is limited. First come, first served. Expired tickets are not available. Drinks and food are not provided in the special price tickets, so please be prepared in advance. This is really a world of difference. The jewelry merchant had seen a product with two prices, but the difference was usually not too big. After all, the cost was still there. Moreover, most of these transactions were carried out in private and would not be made public. Otherwise, the person who spent more money would definitely complain, and it would be difficult to do business with the other party in the future. What Neverwinter did was an eye-opener for him. Not only was it written on the paper, but it also set up many restrictions, as if those who wanted to pay more had to fight for it. However, he found that he had become one of the people who were rushing to come. Roland had to admit that this kind of selling method did have a strange attraction. Those who could afford 40 golden dragons were at least big merchants or aristocratic families. Being able to attend the auction was already a proof of strength, not to mention that he was full of curiosity about the magic movie. Without another word, Victor jumped off the soft couch and put on his wolfskin coat. "Milord?" Ling Long whispered. She was obviously prepared. She was only left with a thin veil. At this moment, she was nestled in the bedding and looked at him helplessly. Victor picked up the clothes that the maid had taken off from the ground and threw them into her arms. Where are the pre-orders for the magic movie? Take me there now. The shooting of The Legend of Wolfheart was in its final stages. Princess Tilly was about to have the final battle with the demon lord in the palace. Roland had given up the entire first floor of the castle for the film crew to shoot the scene. May, the star of the West, was now the main person in charge of the magic movie. In order to achieve the best effect in the new movie, she even gave up her role and devoted herself to rehearsal and directing. Cut. When Lorgar kicked down the castle gate and rushed into the hall, May shouted the stop command. Very good. That's all for today. Thank you for your hard work. Ow. Teacher, you've worked hard too, the troop members replied in unison. In the past, she would have rolled her eyes at them, but now she just smiled and nodded. This is probably the tempering of time, May thought. I've really changed a lot after moving to the border area. Be careful of the wood chips on the ground. Carter Lannis, who was guarding by the side, immediately came over. Do you want me to carry you there? Everyone is watching, May said grumpily. Her husband's temper was impeccable, but his words and actions were not like an upright knight. She did not know what His Majesty saw in him that made him the chief knight. I can walk by myself. Then I'll walk in front of you. Carter stepped in front of her and swept a path for her with his foot. His tall figure immediately blocked out the light shining in from the courtyard. This made May involuntarily raise the corner of her mouth, but she knew that she could not let him find out. Otherwise, it would only make him more arrogant, and she would eventually get herself into trouble at night. Are you ready for tomorrow's performance? Don't forget your lines when Miss Lorgar beats you up. Speaking of the play, Carter's face immediately turned bitter. Can you ask her to be gentle when she hits me? Last time in the snow, I almost threw up the food in my stomach. She's as strong as ashes after she turns into a wolf. They're both monsters. You know what? Only actors submit to the play, not the play. Besides, the magic movie is much more realistic than the play. May covered her mouth and said. So the solution is very simple. Don't eat too much before tomorrow's shooting. The chief knight did not know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and changed the topic. By the way, guess who I saw at the dock today? Well, the former lover. May shrugged. No way. Carter hurriedly turned around and said, It's Cajun Fells. May could not help but stop and asked, Really? Of course. He's a celebrity in the King's City. How could I be wrong? Noticing the change in Lin Sanjia's eyes, Carter grinned and said, And he disembarked with a large group of people. I think they're his acting team. Many people recognized Mr. Cajun at that time. The dock was almost blocked. What do you think? Is this news worth a kiss? It's worth it, May said without hesitation. I want to visit him. Cajun Fells was almost a representative of the play. Since he first appeared on the stage, he had conquered almost all the audiences in the past 30 years. From the southern region to the northern region, no actor who wanted to reach the top could avoid him. Over 50 years old, Cajun could no longer be active on the stage. So he moved from the front of the stage to the backstage and specialized in playwriting. Today, he still had a great influence in the theater industry. When May went to the King's City to perform, it was through his play, The Story of a Prince's Search for Love, that she stood in front of everyone. Without Cajun Fells's guidance and praise, she would not have become the real star of the Western region. At least, she would not have been recognized by the public so quickly. I knew you would say that. Carter handed her a note. I've asked about the hotel they're staying in, but I have to supervise the craftsmen to replace the gate. I won't be able to go with you. Thank you. May happily took the note and said, It doesn't matter. I'll call the people in the troupe. Then she looked at the members of the troupe who were still cleaning up the set and props in the castle, and called out names in one breath. Irene, Tina, Rosia, Gate Swallow. Come here. Yes, Master Cajun must have come for the king's coronation ceremony. When Wimbledon 3 was crowned, it was his continuous performances that pushed the ceremony to its climax. Although he no longer appeared on the stage, the Cajun troupe he led was still the top troupe in Grey Castle. For example, Röntgen, Agripo. They were all talented actors with different styles. If Irene and the others could receive their guidance, it would definitely be a great help to their acting career. As expected, when they heard that they were going to visit Cajun Fells, they could not help but exclaim. Gate was so excited that he stammered. Can we really meet Cajun? I think it should be okay, May said, spreading out her hands. But you have to work harder in the future so that you won't waste this opportunity. Yes. I'll work harder to improve my acting skills. Tina's eyes lit up. Then let's go. They first went to the convenience market to buy some souvenirs as gifts. Then they hurried to the Whistling Hotel, where they would be staying. Many people had already gathered in the tavern on the first floor. When they saw May and the others, they made way for them. Obviously, they had a good impression of the Starflower troupe. Some of them even took out a pen and paper, as if they were going to record the first meeting between the two troupes. There was no doubt that those who carried such things with them were the note-takers of the publicity department. However, to May's surprise, the manager in charge of reception quickly walked down the stairs with a cold face. Chapter 1027. The noise at the scene suddenly froze. Even the tourists around the bar counter put down the wine glasses in their hands and looked at the people of the troupe. May was stunned. When I was in the Old King City, Mr. Cajun gave him advice, right? That's why he doesn't want to see you, the steward said in a low voice. Mr. Cajun is very disappointed in you, Miss May. Although these words were spoken in her ear, but her companions were still able to hear the other side's reply. May felt her own hand was instantly grasped tightly by Irene. This statement was even harsher than an accusation, especially when it came from the mouth of a master dramatist. When it came to the younger generation, their rebuke could be either criticism or encouragement because they had high hopes for them. However, disappointment was a completely different matter. 3 years ago, Lin Sanjiu would have been at a loss and even burst into tears. But now, the first person she thought of was not herself. She had been the star of the Western region for many years, and was the backbone of the Starflower troupe. She was very confident in her acting skills and abilities. If even she was dealt a heavy blow, what would happen to Aaron, Tina, and the others? Not to mention Yanzi, who was talented but lacked confidence. Therefore, May found herself surprisingly calm. She exhaled softly and replied methodically, "Is that so? I think there might be some misunderstanding. It would be best if you can explain it to him face to face. If not, I have to apologize." The steward did not expect that Lin Sanjiu would respond so casually. He could not help but frown. "You. Anyway, I hope Mr. Cajun can make further progress in the theater and make a breakthrough in the ceremony. We won't bother you any longer." Lin Sanjiu took 2 steps forward and turned around. "By the way, please don't call me Miss May. I'm Mrs. Lannis now." On the way back, the weather did not change, but May felt the sky was much gloomier. They were silent and no longer as lively and excited as when they first set off. When they were about to leave, Gate could not help but ask, "Lady May, did you and Master Cajun really?" "Fool, what nonsense are you saying?" Wuxia fiercely glared at him. If Sister May really had a grudge with him before, why would she take the initiative to visit him? Isn't that just asking for trouble? What disappointment. I think you're just jealous. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at her in disbelief. "Hey, the person you're talking about is the master of drama in Grey Castle." "Actually," Rosia said indignantly, "Neverwinter has become the new King's City, and the Starflower troupe is the most popular troupe in the Western region. Their status has declined, so they naturally won't treat us well. I followed Sister May all the way from Longsong to Border Town. Since she came back from the Old King's City, she hasn't had any contact with Cajun's troupe. How can I be disappointed? To put it bluntly, they are looking down on Starflower's short history and lack of fame in the eyes of the nobles. So that's how it is." Irene had a look of sudden realization. It was probably because of Wuxia's righteous and confident voice that everyone regained some of their spirits. "I was wondering why the steward didn't dare to look Lady May in the eye. It seems that he has a guilty conscience." So that's why Master Cajun doesn't want to see Sister May. Of course not. May could not help but roll her eyes. With his fame, why would he be jealous of me? Outside of the Western region, almost no one knows who I am, but in the whole territory of Grey Castle, even in the Kingdom of Dawn, many people have heard of the famous Cajun Fells. You guys are getting more and more ridiculous. Everyone immediately shrank their necks. Anyway, this matter ends here. Do you understand? May clapped her hands and said, "Go back. We have to continue the filming tomorrow." Back at home, Carter also asked about the visit during dinner. She just brushed it off in a few words. Regardless of the reason, May did not want her husband to be involved. After all, it was just an internal conflict in the theater circle. The filming of the magic movie went smoothly in the next few days. The atmosphere that Lin Sanjiu had been worried about did not appear. On the contrary, probably because everyone was holding their breath, the final battle in the palace was exceptionally good. Even Gate performed exceptionally well, and would not take a break until he was on point. The atmosphere even inspired the entire Starflower troupe, which was an eye-opener for the newcomers. During the filming, some people even speculated that it was Master Cajun's guidance that made the actors suddenly work hard. This made May feel a little relieved. It seemed that the accident in the Whistle Hotel did not affect the troupe too much. Just when she thought that the visit was over, something unexpected happened again. One day, the steward of Cajun troupe came to her after the filming. "My master wants to talk to you, May." "No, Mrs. Lannis." He had been waiting outside the castle district for a long time. Even his hat was covered with a thin layer of snow. Without a doubt, he was referring to Cajun Fells, the founder of Cajun Troupe and the master of Grey Castle. At that moment, Lin Sanjiu had a lot of questions in her mind. She even wanted to reject him by saying that she was disappointed. However, she realized that she really wanted to see Cajun. For no other reason than to solve the mystery. "Can I bring my friends with me?" May asked. "No, Cajun only allows you to go alone." The steward shook his head. "Sister May," Irene said worriedly. Lin Sanjiu tilted her head and looked at Irene, indicating that she was okay. Then she took a deep breath and said, "I see. Please lead the way." It was still the Whistle Hotel. May followed the steward to the second floor, and entered a spacious study. Standing with their backs against the bookcase were several familiar faces. Princess Rentgen, Bard and Prodigal Agripo, Flying Cloud Burnus. These were all top-notch actors from all over the world. In A Prince's Search for Love, Lin Sanjiu had cooperated with them quite well. Meeting them again after so many years should have been full of joy. However, from their cold expressions, May only saw contempt and hostility. This surprised her greatly. Although she had given up hope for a warm reunion, the star of the Western region had the impression that even if there were conflicts between them, they would not show it so obviously. For famous actors, hiding their expressions was just a basic skill. Even if they were facing a newcomer, few of them would be willing to fall out with them. This was different from the busybodies of the Longsong Theater. The more famous an actor was, the more he cherished his fame. However, at this moment, they did not even want to pretend to be polite. May looked at the white-haired old man behind the desk. After several years, Cajun seemed to have aged a lot, but none of the actors present would ignore his existence. These people of the same generation didn't say anything. It was obvious that they were waiting for the drama master to speak. Cajun seemed to feel her gaze. He closed the script in his hand and stood up. His first words stunned May. Chapter 1028. Stop the performance. But the magic movie has been shot, and the actors don't need to appear on the stage. No, the point is, why did he say that? May, who did not expect that Cajun would make such a request, fell into a daze. Cajun probably realized that his words were too shocking, so he quickly added, "It's not a cancellation, just a temporary suspension. For example, if he feels unwell and needs a rest, I think the officials will agree to let us meet His Majesty in a week or so." But May wanted to say that the magic movie was different from the previous plays and the Starflower troupe would not be responsible for the performance, but as soon as she said "but," Rentgen sneered at her. Obviously, she had been holding back for a long time. I told you that you're wasting your time. She's the one who made this happen. How can she stop now? Teacher, you're wrong about her. I thought you just went astray and gave up the pursuit of drama. I didn't expect you to go this far. Bernice stamped her feet. I even put in a good word for you the other day. Mrs. Lannis, what do you think drama is? A tool for you to build your reputation? If she didn't tell us, we would still be in the dark. She's the wife of Chief Knight Carter Lannis. Isn't it normal for those officials to want to please her? I don't believe that His Majesty won't give Cajun a chance to perform, considering his reputation. Enough, Cajun Fells bellowed. I didn't ask her to come here to listen to you quarreling, and I don't think May would do that. If you don't believe my judgment, please leave this room. I just want to hear her answer. Oh my God. May was so surprised that she could hardly keep her mouth shut. She pieced together an incredible story from these people's sarcasm. Cajun troupe had wanted to perform in front of His Majesty before the coronation ceremony, and had submitted an application to City Hall. However, they had been unexpectedly rejected. Therefore, when Rentgen and the others learned that May had married Chief Knight Carter, they thought that May had asked the officials to reject the application and shut the company out. This was a huge misunderstanding. If things were really as she thought, then the other party's undisguised hostility could be explained. Whether it was rejection, disappointment, or even competition for roles, it was just a conflict between actors. This was very common in the theater world, and no one would unite against a common enemy because of such things. But it is quite different to use other forces to obstruct the performance of another. That is a kind of encroachment, an encroachment on the career which the performer loves. If it were her, she would probably be even more indignant and contemptuous than them. Except for the members of the troupe who were with me that day, I didn't mention what happened in the hotel to anyone, May said slowly. I can guarantee that. I believe that too. That's why I decided to talk to you. Cajun rubbed his forehead. We know nothing about this new city. We don't know what the problem is. We have no choice but to do this. Of course, we will compensate you later. At the mention of compensation, Rentgen and the others frowned and looked away. May was not in the mood to care about the compensation. Based on her understanding of Cajun Fells, he must have his reasons for making such a request. Before I answer you, I want to ask you a question. She thought for a moment and said, Your supervisor mentioned that you were disappointed in me. Why? The old man was silent for a while, then he waved at the other actors. Teacher. Rentgen seemed to want to say something, but she finally shut her mouth and left the study. The others followed her out of the study, and soon only the two of them were left in the room. Cajun Fells stared at May, and the reproach in his eyes made May want to avoid him. How many plays have you acted in the past 2 years? However, what Cajun Fells said surprised her. 7 or 8, May said hesitantly. A total of 12 plays, Cajun said, counting on his fingers. Cinderella, The Witch Story, Dawn, New City. Let's not talk about the plays themselves. Do you really think you can act them well? May was stunned. Have you seen them? No, that was a stupid question. She immediately realized that her plays were mainly in the western region, and he must have heard about them from others. Sure enough, Cajun shook his head. I have students in all 4 regions of Grey Castle, so it's not difficult for me to know about them. He sighed. But when you acted in A Prince's Search for Love, it took you more than half a year and 2 months. May did not respond. She had already understood what he meant. A vivid performance was honed by a lot of time behind the scenes. This was an unbreakable law in the theater world. No matter how talented an actor was, they could not guarantee that they could memorize every line and every action in a short period of time. In fact, because she had rehearsed too many plays, she did make a lot of low-level mistakes that she had never made before. For example, she remembered the wrong lines, used the wrong expressions, and so on. These mistakes might be hard to notice in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of the picky audience, they would inevitably appear particularly abrupt. I don't know why you moved from the Longsong Theater to Bordertown and started acting in such a variety show at the same time, Cajun said in a low voice. The Lord might have ordered you to do it, but he wouldn't have forced you to do it without your own will. After all, a play is a dance in front of everyone. No one can dance with shackles. May. He did not address her as Mrs. Lannis. Instead, he used the tone he used to teach her. You should know very well that the level of the audience can help an actor improve his or her skills. Without high expectations and standards, how can you have the motivation to move forward? You do cater to most people, but you've given up the pursuit of higher acting skills. That's why I'm disappointed in you. May was unable to refute or even defend herself, because she knew that the other party was right. Judging from her acting skills, she had indeed been on the decline recently. Not only had she spent less time practicing, but she had also given up her role in The Wolf Princess. One play after another did not allow her to delve deeply into it. Supporting the Starflower troupe had also consumed a lot of her energy. After a long time, she asked, "Have you been preparing for this play for a long time?" "Exactly 2 years, Cajun said proudly. "We've been practicing it every day except for the old plays. Even on the ship and in this hotel, we haven't wasted a single moment. Every detail has been perfected. All we need is a suitable platform, and these children will be able to put on a perfect play, which is even more perfect than my previous play, Looking for Love." Chapter 1029. That was indeed the case. Cajun Fells was still the person May was familiar with. At least in terms of drama, he had a pure faith. Because of this faith, he did not hide his disappointment in her, nor did he change his words just because he needed her help. It seemed to be a natural choice for a person who truly loved drama to make room for his troupe in exchange for a perfect performance. However, she found that she could not easily say yes. Something seemed to be stopping her. May closed her eyes and faintly heard a girl's voice. "Mrs. Lannis, please wait for me. This is my token of appreciation. Please accept it." Then, someone handed a salted fish to her. At that moment, May suddenly understood what was stopping her. She opened her eyes and met the drama master's gaze. This time, she did not try to avoid the question. There were many ways to evade the question. First, he had to affirm his appreciation for the movie, then use up it as a turning point. Then, he could explain the nature of the magic movie and tell Roland that the movie was decided by His Majesty himself. All of these could be considered as a reasonable answer. Cajun Fells knew little about Neverwinter. He did not know the uniqueness of the Starflower troupe, nor did he understand how much His Majesty valued drama. He had been searching in the wrong direction from the beginning. If she could explain it clearly, not only could she reverse the misunderstanding, but she might even be able to redeem Master Cajun's disappointment. However, May knew that it was just another way of avoiding the question. "Mr. Cajun, is your performance just for His Majesty?" "For the nobles, ministers, and lords who came to congratulate me," Cajun said with a nod. "Without a suitable audience, no matter how wonderful the performance is, it's meaningless. Just like gold and jewels, or fine wine and jade cups, every smile and movement of an actor had its own meaning. Only a careful and dedicated appreciator could taste the difference between the excellent and the extreme." It was reasonable. "Then forgive me for not being able to promise you," said May sternly, "because what you are putting on is by no means a perfect play." "Beach." "What?" The old man frowned. "You haven't even seen it, so how did you come to such a conclusion? Because no matter how wonderful it is, those people are just watching from the sidelines." She felt a surge of strength in her heart. They will applaud, praise, talk about it in their leisure time, but that's all. The play is but a small part of their pleasures, and their lives would be the same without it. How can it be called perfect if it is only something that is not necessary? Cajun Fell's face darkened. To a creator, a play was like their own child. No one could accept such an evaluation. "I thought you lost your way in the pursuit of fame. I didn't expect you to learn to be arrogant like everyone else." "From what you said, could it be that you've seen what a perfect play looks like?" "I haven't seen it before," May said frankly, "but I know what it should look like." Cajun stared at her, his eyes as sharp as a knife. His years of experience gave him an oppressive feeling, which was enough to make the younger generation of the theater tremble. Cajun was obviously waiting for her to explain further, which was a very easy answer to her. In other words, no matter what she said, she would not be able to satisfy him. But May did not back down. She also knew that if she said what she was going to say, she would embark on a completely different path. A path that they had never seen and could not understand. This meant that she would part ways with most of the people in the theater circle. By then, not only would they be disappointed, but they would also lose all their friendships and she would never be able to blend in with them again. It's a big price to pay, isn't it? She asked herself. Then another voice answered her. But it's worth it. May opened her mouth and said. A wonderful play should not only be an entertainment, but also an entertainment that only enters the noble's field of vision when they are free. It can carry more things, and can even change the fate of others. The Witch Diaries gave the people a chance to understand the life of witches, so they could remove the stigma that didn't belong to them. Dawn encouraged people to work and say goodbye to poverty, hunger and cold. Many people listened to this call, and lived a well-off life. New City made the new immigrants accept the rules of Neverwinter in a direct way, which also made the black street rats have no place to hide. And a hero's life. She paused and said slowly. It made a sad little girl cheer up and start a new life. I think there are many people like her who lost their loved ones in the war. No matter how many people have changed because of this, I'm happy to help them through a play. What are you trying to say? Cajun said in a low voice. You once told me that the best play is to let the audience immerse themselves in the life of the characters. But now, I want them to see their own future. May said bluntly. Even if the nobles lose their jewelry and jade cups, they can find other substitutes. But my plays can fill the stomachs of most people. For the first time, Cajun did not respond to this answer. I believe the play you've prepared for 2 years must be wonderful, but the Wolf Princess that the Star Flower Troupe is about to perform is also beyond my imagination. Although it only took a little more than a month to prepare, and it's the first time for some of the actors to perform, it's still the best play I've ever seen. She bowed slightly and said, If you don't change your mind after watching it, I'll recommend your new play to His Majesty. After leaving the Whistling Inn, May's whole body felt comfortable. Even her footsteps were a lot lighter. As soon as she walked out of the alley, she saw Carter Lannis waiting for her on the street. Why are you here? May asked in surprise. Irene said you were picked up by Mr. Cajun's manager. I was a little worried, so I came here. Carter shrugged. I have to go to the convenience market to buy some food for dinner. It's on the way. Really? May glanced at him. You already knew what happened in the inn that day, didn't you? You didn't even eat a bowl of rice that day. It would be strange if I didn't know, Chief Knight said proudly. Wait. She suddenly stopped. Did you tell City Hall that Cajun troupe was going to perform? Wait. She stopped abruptly. What? Carter raised his eyebrows. What are you talking about? Who did I refuse to perform? May stared at him for a long time before she let out a sigh of relief. No, nothing. Hey, you're not going to tell me again. It's not important. She smiled. By the way, you haven't bought dinner yet, have you? Why? Is there something you want to eat? Well, let's have salted fish tonight. Salted fish? I thought you didn't like salted fish. You ate the fish that the girl gave you last time for days. I like it now. Can't I? May interrupted Carter, and reached out her right hand. I'm just asking if you want to go. Of course. The knight took her hand without hesitation. As long as it's your request, I'll go anywhere. Chapter 1030. Finally, the day of the Wolf Princess' performance had arrived. As soon as the light shone through the window, Victor was awakened by a rustling sound. He opened his eyes and found that there was no one beside his pillow, except for a few strands of hair and the faint fragrance of a young girl. Ling Long, he said in a slightly hoarse voice. My lord, you're awake? The person who answered seemed a little flustered. Did I disturb you by moving too much? The jewel merchant got up and leaned against the headboard. He couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. The maidservant was fumbling with the way to put on the dress. She only had time to put on half of the dress, and her smooth back was completely exposed. Together with her half-covered chest, She had a unique charm that would make people want to love her. Can you not look at me like that? Linglong said, blushing. This was a feeling that those noble ladies would never give him. Victor chuckled. All right, I won't look at you. But there's one thing you should know. You can't put it on without help. The maid was at a loss. Come here, I'll help you. He spread out his hands. But let me drink some water first. I'm so thirsty. After tying the laces, Victor casually touched the maid's waist. It's done. It suits you quite well. Don't be fooled by the flimsiness of the dress. Before the invention of telescopic straps, the servants responsible for dressing the young lady had to be tall and sturdy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fasten it. I see. The girl stuck out her tongue. This is the first time I've heard of it. Many things of the nobility are like that. They look good, but are extremely troublesome to use. To put it simply, they're flashy but impractical. He laughed. Why can't you wait to wear them out? No, I just wanted to get up early and get ready so that I wouldn't delay your journey. Linglong waved her hands. I'll go get some water for you to wash up and prepare breakfast. Do I have to do groceries in this dress? Victor looked at the obviously excited maid, and did not expose her. Go ahead. Freshly baked bread and fried eggs will be fine. Don't forget to have one for yourself. Yes, thank you, my lord. She bowed respectfully before leaving. And thank you for the dress. And the opportunity to watch the play. After closing the door, Victor climbed out of bed and poured himself a glass of red wine. This was another advantage of this kind of woman. As long as he gave her a little favor, he would receive great rewards and gratitude. If he gave it to a lady from a noble family, he might not even see her smile. 80 gold royals were nothing to him. It was much more interesting for two people to enjoy a play than one. This had nothing to do with generosity or love. It was just a matter of taking what they needed. The only thing he was curious about was how exciting the magic movie, which was worth 40 gold royals, would be. Teacher, do you really want to go? Renkin looked at the neatly dressed Cajun Fells with a worried look on her face. May did say that she would recommend your new play to His Majesty, but it could just be a cover. If she wants to use your fame to boost her own popularity, won't you be playing right into her hands if you go there? I think so too. She's not trustworthy at all now, Agripo muttered. What do you mean by recommending a new play? Does she think she can see His Majesty whenever she wants? But May's husband is the chief knight. Even if she can't see him, she can at least pass a message to him, right? Bernice said cautiously. Are you going to put in a good word for her again? Rentgen glared at her. Don't forget how she treated us. Didn't teacher say that she didn't tamper with the city hall? Who knows if she lied? That's enough. Cajun interrupted. I'm not going for this so-called recommendation. She can be arrogant, but we can't do that. Even if I don't agree with her, I have to see the play first. He snorted. How can a bunch of newbies act out a perfect story? How dare she say that? If we don't go and see it, we'll be frightened by her. Only after seeing it will we be able to better expose her, isn't it? Cajun then slapped 4 exquisite tickets on the table. So these are not tickets but letters of challenge. It's up to you whether you want to go or not. But remember, if you haven't seen it, don't criticize it. If you want to accept her challenge, come with me. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the entrance of the new theater was full of people. Obviously, everyone was looking forward to the long-promoted magic movie. Even though they could not afford the expensive tickets for the premiere, many people still hoped to see it through tricks. However, they were surprised to find that this theater was completely different from the ones they had seen before. It did not have a single window and looked like an upside-down bowl. Even if they pressed their faces against the wall, they would not be able to hear what was going on inside, let alone peek through the window. At the same time, it was very small. It was only a quarter of the size of the central square, no more than 15 meters in length and 1 story high. Coupled with its unadorned gray cement exterior, it was hard to believe that a play that transcended the era was about to be staged here. At this moment, Victor and Tinkle walked into the entrance of the theater with the same doubts in mind. There were many checkpoints in the corridor that only allowed one person to pass through. Only after handing over his god's stone of retaliation and his dagger could he enter. The moment they pushed the door open, their eyes suddenly lit up. Wow! Tinkle could not help exclaiming. Even Victor was surprised to find that the lighting in the theater was actually a magic stone. He had only seen such a valuable item in black money. The fact that it could be used in such a public place showed the power of the owner. Unlike the simple appearance, the interior of the theater was luxurious. For clusters of stones of lighting were hanging from the arched dome, brightly illuminating the windowless interior. Warm air gushed out from under the feet, keeping the interior in a pleasant and warm state. Rows of reclining chairs were placed in the center, about an arm's length away from each other. Therefore, the entire hall looked extraordinarily spacious and did not feel cramped at all. Victor vaguely realized that this might be the reason why the theater charged such a high price for the tickets. The spacious space brought a comfortable viewing experience, but it also resulted in a very low seating ratio. According to the number of reclining chairs, a round of performances would probably only accommodate 50 to 80 people, which was far less than any official performance. If the ticket price did not increase, it would probably be impossible to break even. But the next question followed. He looked around but could not find the stage. In the center of the hall was a thick stone pillar that was directly connected to the roof. Apart from that, there were only seats, leaving no space for performances. Chapter 1031. Victor suppressed his doubts and sat down in row 3, seat 10, according to the seat number on the ticket. "You're the one from the Lothar family," someone suddenly said. He turned his head in surprise and found that it was a woman dressed luxuriously. Unlike Tinkle, she was obviously a veteran in love, and could always show her most seductive side at any time. "Victor Lothar, may I know who you are? I've heard a lot about you." The woman smiled and put her hand on her chest. "I'm Denise Peyton from the City of Glow in the Kingdom of Dawn." "Oh, you're the eldest daughter of the Peyton family." Victor suddenly realized. "I didn't expect to meet a merchant from the same city in a foreign country. I didn't expect to meet the rumored business genius here either." Denise pointed to the person beside her. "Let me introduce you. This is His Excellency Yorko, the former ambassador of the Kingdom of Dawn. It was he who invited me here. Nice to meet you." Then they exchanged pleasantries. During the conversation with Yorko, Victor also got to know a group of people from the upper class of Grey Castle. As he expected, those who could enter the theater at the premiere were basically rich and respectable. For example, most of the audience sitting in the front row were people with real power in the city hall. According to Yorko, their tickets were all given by His Majesty, so they did not have to pay a single copper royal. In the middle and back rows were rich businessmen and distinguished guests from all over the world. He even saw the Grey Castle King's city troupe in the crowd. The threshold of 40 golden dragons turned the theater into a small banquet. If he could make friends with these people, the reward would be worth the ticket price. After everyone had arrived, more than 10 attendants pushed a cart out of another door and placed a strange paper bag into the groove next to the armrest of the lounge chair. "Are these for us?" Tinkle picked up a bag and looked at it curiously. The words written on it seemed to be popcorn? There are also French fries and milk, so these are for food? Victor noticed that the material of the bag marked with the word milk was quite strange. It looked like parchment but was extremely soft to the touch. It was just that its appearance was the same, so no one knew where to start. Fortunately, there was a drawing at the bottom of the words, which undoubtedly took into account the customer's first time using it. When he followed the steps in the picture, and inserted a transparent tube into the top seal of the bag to suck the milk inside, he couldn't help but feel an indescribable sense of achievement. This is so interesting. Even the milk that was usually bland seemed to have become much sweeter. The warm reminder, the exquisite design, and the never-before-seen packaging. Even if it was filled with water, it could still sell for a good price. The person who designed it must be an outstanding businessman. Moreover, Victor realized that this method was not just for the sake of novelty and fun. Unlike traditional porcelain and glassware with edges and corners, these two types of bags were obviously difficult to cause harm to people. Considering the identity of the spectators, this was especially important. At the same time, the storage slot next to the chair was completely attached to the bag. Even if the paper bag was opened and placed inside, there would not be any spillage. It was hard to imagine that such a mature combination would appear on a new product for the first time. Just as Victor was about to taste the popcorn, an ethereal voice suddenly sounded from the upper part of the hall. Welcome to the Magic Cinema in Grey Castle. The Wolf Princess is about to start. Please return to your seats and listen carefully to the rules of the movie. If you encounter any problems during the movie, please act according to the rules to avoid accidents. There was a sudden uproar in the hall because the audience could only hear the voice but could not find the speaker. First of all, the duration of the magic movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes, which is more than 2 hours and a quarter. During this period, there's no rest time and you're not allowed to leave your seats. If you need help, just pull the string of the summoning bell under your seat and wait where you are. Secondly, this will be an unprecedented viewing experience. No matter what happens, please don't panic. Please remember that it's only a special play and not a real event. If you cause any third party to suffer any damage due to your own fault, the Neverwinter Police Department will hold you responsible. Hearing this, Victor could not help but chuckle. Hey, there are people in this world who take a play seriously? They even use the word panic. It's a little like they're boasting. He took the opportunity to glance behind him. Sure enough, the faces of his fellow actors were full of sarcasm. However, Tinkle did not feel anything wrong at all. She even nervously grabbed the armrest of the recliner, perhaps to give them some time to digest the information. The voice sounded again after a few breaths. Then please enjoy this dreamlike time. Now let the show begin. As the voice fell, for clusters of magic stones of lighting slowly rose and disappeared into the dome. The hall immediately darkened. What does this mean? The light source directly affected the overall effect of the play. This was the reason why open-air theaters were so popular. If there was no light, how could the audience appreciate the details of the performance? The smile on Victor's face widened even more. He was getting more and more curious as to how he was going to clean up the mess after making it so mysterious at the beginning. However, before he could stop smiling, he was stunned in the next second. After a flash of white light, his field of vision instantly turned pitch black. This was definitely the darkest darkness he had ever seen. It was no exaggeration to say that it was an abyss. Not to mention his front, back, left and right. Even the chair he was sitting on had disappeared without a trace. If it was not for the feeling under his butt, he would have jumped up. But what was even more unbelievable was that Victor found that his body was also completely hidden in the darkness. Even if he put his hand in front of his eyes, he would not be able to feel anything. He could no longer tell whether it was because it was too dark or because he had been completely deprived of his vision. The turmoil in the hall proved that he was not the only one who was surprised. The shouting and wrangling among the audience filled the air with a tense atmosphere. Panic is not just for show. If it was not for the warning at the beginning of the show, the audience would have already fallen into chaos. At this moment, a gentle light sprinkled down from above, dispersing the darkness and illuminating the hall again. However, the audience did not calm down because of this. Instead, they all gasped. Oh my God! Victor also widened his eyes. What is this? The scene in front of him was no longer in the theater, but had moved to the sky. He could hear the cold wind blowing in his ears, and he could clearly see the sky with snowflakes flying. There was nothing under his feet. He was at least 1,000 feet above the ground. The mountains and forests had turned into gray and white spots, like children's graffiti. This experience that he had never experienced before made Victor tremble all over. He almost used all his strength to hold on to the armrest and curl his body into the invisible recliner. It was as if it was the only thing that could support him. If he slipped, he would fall from the sky and not even his bones would be left. In a mountain capital in the distant north, there lived 2 lively and lovely princesses, and our story begins here. It was not until the narration began that he realized that he was still watching a play, and not being summoned to heaven by God. There are people in this world who can take a play seriously? Victor wanted to cry but had no tears. Who would have thought that the magic movie would be like this? Chapter 1032. After the view was pulled from the sky to the ground, the breathtaking scene did not change at all. In other words, the more things reflected in the eyes, the more realistic it was. Whether it was the bustling market with people coming and going, or the magnificent inner court of the palace, everything was too much for Victor to take in. If he was not worried about causing any third-party loss, he even wanted to stand up and touch the throne with his own hands. Exclamations rose and fell in the hall. The audience seemed to have lost the ability to speak, and could only express the shock in their hearts with short shouts. Any change in the scene could cause an uproar. The Princess Royal appeared. Oh, a 14-year-old wolf transformed. Wow, a foreign prince came to visit. Whoa, 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 whoa. Her ability was out of control. Lightning and thunder swept the palace into a mess. The audience was even more exclaiming. And the sound was so loud that it seemed like the floor was about to be overturned. Unlike the traditional theater that paid attention to silence and gentleness, the shouts in the magic theater never stopped from beginning to end. Victor knew that this had nothing to do with the audience's quality. It was purely to ease the extremely contradictory feelings in their hearts. They were eager to enjoy the unprecedented wonder, but they were also full of fear for the overly realistic scene. Therefore, they could only shout out. Only in this way could they know that they were not experiencing this illusion alone. There were many people around them, or sharing the shock with them. If Roland was present, he would definitely understand that this was just another form of bullet screen protection. In such a shout, the Princess Royal completely transformed into a giant wolf, and threw herself into the snowfield. When her huge body passed over his head, Victor only felt that his scalp was numb, and he almost couldn't help but want to run away. But at the same time, a high-pitched song entered his ears, making him instantly calm down. All the uneasiness dissipated, replaced by strong grievances, unwillingness, relief, perseverance. Several kinds of feelings alternated, and Victor actually burst into tears for a moment. He seemed to empathize with the Princess Royal who was forced to escape. He was sad for the misunderstanding of the people, but also proud of the courage, the beautiful music and the scene transformation, and even every movement of the characters in the play intertwined. The beautiful voice made his heart boil, and the description of the lyrics was more like a portrayal of himself in this life, who had not been misunderstood. However, most people could only choose to endure in silence. Victor's fear of the she-wolf girl was gone. Instead, he applauded her for breaking free from her shackles. Through her, he seemed to see himself far away from home. There was no doubt that this was an excellent song, but for the song and the drama to be combined so perfectly, without the slightest feeling of being overpowered, this was the first time he had experienced such a sense of harmony. Judging from the applause from the audience, he was not the only one who felt it. This scene had touched everyone's heart, and pushed the atmosphere in the hall to the highest point since the beginning of the performance. At that moment, Victor had already made a judgment about this new drama in his heart. There was no exaggeration in His Majesty's propaganda. This was definitely an art that surpassed the times. He lost. The moment the song started, Cajun knew that he had lost to May. It was not a personal defeat, but a complete defeat for his new play, The Wolf Princess. No matter how nice the story was, a play had to be watched by people. At first he still had the time to wonder, how is this possible? And how did she do it? But he soon became numb. This so-called magic movie had completely subverted the common sense he had accumulated over the past decades, and trampled on all the existing rules. The audience in the hall was already very picky. Although they were not as insightful as the old nobles who had immersed themselves in the entertainment industry for a long time, they were all experienced and knowledgeable, so it was not easy to impress them. However, at this moment, these people could not stop shouting, as if they were villagers who had never seen the world. But it was not their fault. If he had not tried his best to restrain himself, he would have shouted too. The new play prepared by Cajun's troupe could not have done this. If you put the two together, anyone would come to the same conclusion. The Wolf Princess was more exciting, and much more so. Can't they see the mistakes and carelessness of the actors? Of course not. But they could totally ignore these problems. Cajun knew very well that a person could only receive a limited amount of information at one time, and the magic movie provided him with a wealth of information that was almost too much for his eyes to take in. Under such circumstances, it was difficult to attract the attention of the audience even if the actors made one or two small mistakes. So this was an unfair competition? Cajun did not think so. No one knew the development of a play better than he did. The reason why famous actors preferred to work in large theaters was that the latter had enough money and could provide better costumes, props, and scenery. These were also indispensable elements of a wonderful play. His teacher had made a name for himself by putting large backdrops on the stage. His masterpiece was the invention of the detachable wooden house, which was very popular at that time. Since then, all theater troupes had tried to imitate his invention, which was how today's plays came to be. If an actor were to go on stage empty-handed, he would not think that it was a perfect performance. The layout of the scene had always been closer to realism and exquisiteness. The Starflower troupe had just done this to the extreme. Cajun relaxed when he came to this conclusion. He leaned back in the soft recliner and heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, he could focus on this rare play. Before he knew it, the story had come to an end. The darkness faded, and the chairs, pillars, and floor reappeared in front of the audience. But no one stood up and left. They seemed to be still immersed in the illusionary capital of the mountains, recalling the thrilling battle between the Wolf Princess and the Demon Lord. Cajun Fells was the first to applaud. His applause seemed to wake the audience up. Then the second, the third. More and more people raised their hands. Soon, the applause grew louder and louder, like a thunderstorm. Teacher. Cajun was applauding. Rentgen, Agripo, and the others almost burst into tears. Bernice's eyes were already filled with tears. Don't cry. The old man also felt tears welling up in his eyes. He knew what Bernice was sad about. The actors had trained hard for more than 2 years for this new play. Everyone could see how much effort and sweat they had put in. But now, all their efforts were in vain. Those who had watched the magic movie would no longer be interested in the new play. This kind of defeat, which had ended before it had even begun, would undoubtedly destroy anyone's confidence. But Cajun knew that he could not give up here. We didn't go the wrong way. Teacher, you mean? What's the most regrettable thing about a play? It's the distance. He tried to control his trembling voice and said as calmly as possible. The distance between the audience and the stage is enough to make people miss the subtle expressions of the actors. But the magic movie can make up for this. I bet that improving your acting skills will only become more and more important in the future. Perhaps a well-timed smile can make the audience hold their breath. So this is just a temporary failure. It doesn't mean that your efforts are worthless. Cajun paused for a second and said, Don't worry. I promise you that after we figure out how the magic movie works, we'll come back and compete with the Starflower troupe on the same line. I think the audience will give us the right feedback. But don't cry now. Stick out your chest. It deserves our applause. Chapter 1033. Roland was not surprised by the strong reaction and sensation caused by the magic movie. In fact, on the night of the filming, he, as the producer and one of the first audience members, was also shocked when he watched this pioneering work in the castle hall. The visual impact of the virtual illusion could not be described in a few words. Now that he thought about it, he did not have such a strong feeling in the Reflection Church in the Old Holy City. It was because most of the meetings and celebrations recorded in the sigil were static images. Although it was very novel, it had limited stimulation to the senses. But once it was changed to a dynamic recording, it would be extremely realistic. For example, when falling from a high altitude, the brain would still be deceived by the eyes even though it was fake. Even Roland felt this way, not to mention the general public, whose level of appreciation was still at the stage. The success of the magic movie was already within his expectations. However, there were some things that exceeded Roland's expectations. That was, the effects of the magic shadow were a little too good. In the third and fifth performances, the audience fled and fainted. The former almost caused a stampede, while the latter was rushed to the hospital. If it were not for Nana, he would probably have been killed. And all of the above happened before Echo's song started. Obviously, the bird's eye view at the beginning and the awakening of the elder princess into a wolf were the areas with the highest incidence of problems. Moreover, this was a high-priced theater designed for the rich, so the audience was much more knowledgeable and receptive than the general public. If it was the fair-priced theater a week later, the situation would be even worse. Realizing this, Roland had no choice but to revise his broadcast plan. Originally, he wanted to increase the number of people by changing the seats. For example, if he replaced the reclining chairs in the high-priced theater with benches, the number of audience would immediately double. This was also the reason why the fair-priced theater did not allow people to bring their own food and drinks. However, if he wanted to prevent people from stampeding, benches that could fall with a push were obviously not suitable. In the end, he replaced them with iron benches that could be fixed to the ground, and required the audience to wear belts to prevent disasters. In addition, he also restricted the audience's age and physical condition. People over 45, or people with a history of acrophobia or palpitations were not allowed to watch The Wolf Princess. After all, magic movies were new to him. Whether it was the design of the new theater or the rules for watching the movie, he had to start from scratch. Due to the popularity of the magic movie, the trinkets that were given as gifts also attracted the attention of many people. In the past few days, the City Hall had received more than a dozen trade applications from merchants. All of them had come for the popcorn and milk bags, hoping to win a monopoly. However, after listening to Barev's report, Roland rejected all of their requests. After all, puffy foods like popcorn were difficult to preserve, and there was no technical difficulty in making them. It was not profitable to supply the corn by himself, and it was easy to imitate the technology provided by the partnership. Besides, Neverwinter was not the main corn producer, so he did not have any advantage in the competition. Therefore, it was better to hold it in his hands and use it as a sweetener to attract foreign people. As for the packaging, there wasn't enough left to sell. It was one of the first products of the rubber worm breeding industry. After nearly a year of breeding, these worms had basically settled down in the third border city, and the ancient witches' research on them had made considerable progress. Ever since they discovered that by adjusting the ratio of the worm's mucus and organ secretions, they could obtain different kinds of colloids with different degrees of flexibility, the research quickly became clear. It became a sideline for the tequila survivors to synthesize different kinds of samples, and then test their corrosion resistance and wear resistance. The liquid packaging and the straw came from this sideline. Making these two things was not just a whim. They were also very important to the army's logistical support. Whether it was to hold food or disinfectant, soft plastic bags could be of great use. Not to mention, compared to metal or glass containers, the cost of making them was much lower. Apart from insects, almost no additional resources were consumed. Although the third border city had dug several new caves for the breeding of rubber worms, and the number of rubber worms had increased from 100 to nearly 1,000, it was still far from enough to meet the needs of the war. Therefore, it was foreseeable that the rubber worms would be one of Neverwinter's strategic resources for a long time. On the fourth day after the release of the magic movie, Roland received news that Edith, the Pearl of the Northern Region, had returned to Neverwinter with Olivia. He met the woman he had met once before in the castle's reception hall again. She looked a little nervous, but she did not avoid his gaze. There was a vague sense of resignation in her eyes. Different from their last encounter at night, in the well-lit hall, Roland could see her more clearly. Her delicate facial features and slim body made her look like a weather-beaten flower. The fatigue and weakness caused by the long voyage made her look even more delicate. However, her inner unyieldingness supported her and prevented her from really collapsing. This kind of contrast added a layer of beauty to her, causing others to either be unable to help but want to protect her, or want to possess and destroy her. If she fell into the hands of other lords, there would be only one of these two outcomes. She seemed to be prepared for such a fate. Roland could not help laughing. Although the circle of nobles in this era was indeed chaotic, he had no such thoughts. "Don't worry," Roland said pleasantly. "It's much warmer here than in Coldwind Ridge. No one will disturb your life here. You'll like this city after a while. Yes. Your Majesty. She hesitated for a moment, and then lowered her head. Then you can go and have a rest. Someone will arrange a room for you, Roland said. After Olivia was taken away by the guards, Edith did a curtsy and said, That's all? I thought you'd talk to her more, and get to know her better. You've said everything you wanted to say. I have nothing else to add. Roland shrugged and pretended that he did not understand the meaning of the word love. How was the trip? Did it go well? Of course. She's very decisive when it comes to her child. Edith replied. It took longer than expected to clean up the mess, but those people won't give you any more trouble. Good job. He nodded. It was the right choice to let you handle it. Thank you, Your Majesty. The Pearl of the Northern Region said with a smile. There's one more thing I need to report. On my way back, I received a message from an engineering team. Azima didn't find the glory of the sun in the eastern region, so she's heading north. So, that line came from the other side of the swirling sea. Roland frowned slightly. If the line could only go north, it would be fine if it was in Grey Castle, but it would be difficult if it was in other kingdoms. I see. Roland quickly recovered his composure. You can go and have a rest. Yes. When she reached the door, Edith suddenly turned around and said, You too. Your Majesty, please take care of yourself. Oh. Roland looked at her in surprise. Chapter 1034. That girl is too presumptuous, Nightingale said discontentedly as she emerged from the mist. What does she mean by that? Indeed, ever since he had talked to the Pearl of the Northern Region about how Iron Axe dealt with the nobles, her attitude had changed slightly. She seemed to have let go of herself. Although for Roland this was not a bad thing. He thought for a moment. Can you tell if she's telling the truth? It's true. Nightingale curled her lips. At least she didn't lie about wanting you to take care of your body. Otherwise, I would have taken control of her and interrogated her. In that case, let her be. Roland laughed. If I have to guess everyone's thoughts, it'll be too tiring. I don't have that much energy. Nightingale, who had been indignant, suddenly froze. Then she pretended to look away and said, You're right. I only have to worry about 1 or 2 people. You're so good at hiding it. You're really showing your thoughts on your face. Roland tried his best not to smile. He cleared his throat and said, Then let's go back to the office. There's a lot of work to be done. For example, putting into use the 2 internal combustion engines that had passed the prototype test. Having a power source was only the first step. How to mass-produce them and manufacture the corresponding mechanical equipment were all difficult problems. In addition, there was also the design and assembly of armored trains, the production of biocolloids, and the expansion of more factories and armies. However, compared to another thing, he could put these work aside for a while. Although it did not have much significance, it was necessary to gather the people's support. The moment Olivia arrived in Neverwinter, it meant that all the conditions for the coronation were in place. A week later, the castle district of Neverwinter was open to the public for the first time. Under the guidance of the police and guards, thousands of screened people gathered in the courtyard, excitedly waiting for the coronation of the new king. Outside the castle district, the streets were decorated with lanterns and streamers. Even the sporadic snowflakes in the sky could not dampen the enthusiasm of the people for the celebration. For this grand ceremony, the Lord's castle was also temporarily remodeled. The outer wall of the vestibule was removed and replaced with a fence that did not obstruct the view, and the yard was removed and replaced with a flat lawn. As long as he ascended the long slope to the castle area, he would be able to have a panoramic view of the entire ceremony. Both sides of the castle were hung with red banners with black edges. The banners hung from the roof all the way to the ground. The color combination was particularly eye-catching in the snow-covered background, and it also added a sense of gravity to the not-so-grand castle. The biggest change came from the second floor of the castle. It was as if overnight, a diagonal support had been built on the bare facade, causing a half-empty balcony to appear on the second floor. The front of the terrace faced the vestibule gate, where the king would undoubtedly receive the blessings of his subjects. Only the designer, Minister Carr, knew that the platform structure, which was completed quickly, was created by the witches. After Ms. Agatha extended the ice wall on the castle wall, Ms. Soroya drew a brick layer, and it became a part of the castle that was indistinguishable from the real one. In such weather, the thick ice wall could last for a few days. At this moment, there was another scene in the castle. "Your Majesty, are you ready?" Vendi's voice came from outside the bedroom. "All the ministers and guests have arrived, and we're just waiting for you." "I see. I'll be ready in a minute," Roland responded and turned to look at the girl in a pure white dress. "What do you think?" "Wait a minute. I'm still a little nervous." The girl was Anna. She stood in front of the window and looked down at the noisy crowd through the curtain. Her blue eyes were obviously rippling. "Do you really want to go on the stage with me?" The ceremonial officer said that such a thing has never happened in previous coronations. She was not as fearless as he thought. Roland realized that although Anna had always been smiling at him, when the moment really came, she would still be worried and confused. Her excellence in learning and love for new knowledge made her full of confidence most of the time. When she devoted herself to creation and manufacturing, she shone like a genius. But apart from these halos, she was just a girl in her early 20s who grew up in a remote village. Now that she was about to face the eyes of tens of thousands of people, it was impossible for her not to be nervous. Thinking of this, Roland smiled and said in the softest voice, "Then I'll be the first person to make an exception. Or, do you want me to crown myself alone?" "Of course not." Anna shook her head. Roland walked up to her and hugged her. "Then I'll put it another way." "Put it another way?" "Well." He took a breath and pretended to be serious. "Miss Anna, I want to hire you as my wife. Are you willing?" Pfft. Anna could not help but laugh. "No way. I'm not a prisoner in a cage now, and what? The engagement time is too short." She hammered Roland's shoulder hard, and then reached out her right hand, which was wearing a white veil. "Thank you, Roland. Take me down." Roland held her palm firmly. "Yes." Opening the door, they slowly walked through the corridor, went down the stairs, and entered the hall on the first floor. The noisy hall immediately quieted down. Everyone stood in 2 rows and slightly bowed their heads, welcoming Roland's arrival. He walked along the line. On the left were the witches of Neverwinter. He saw Tilly, Ashes, Nightingale, Vendi, Lightning, Agatha. One by one, familiar faces came into view. Compared to the refugees who had nowhere to go 3 years ago, they had now reintegrated into the new social order, and gradually became an inseparable part of the human kingdom. On the right were the officials of City Hall and representatives from various places, such as Bear of Edith, Ironaxe, Carr, Caltheo, Yorko, and so on. Together, they formed the power structure of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. They had turned from ordinary people into rising political stars. According to tradition, the coronation was an extremely complicated process. However, for the witches and the officials of Neverwinter, Roland's throne had long been established, so the process was greatly simplified. He took Anna's hand and walked to the center of the hall. There was a stone table there, on which stood 2 golden crowns. The Church of Wimbledon III and Hermes no longer existed. He declined the ceremonial officer's request, and decided to wear the crowns together with Anna. It was unprecedented for Grey Castle to have a coronation and a queen at the same time. Of course, the ceremonial officer expressed his objection, but it was not binding on Roland, who held great power. Unexpectedly, Berev also stood on Roland's side. Roland bent down and let Anna put the crown on his head. Then he gently put the other crown on her head. When the 2 of them turned around, everyone knelt down on 1 knee in unison. "Long live the king!" Amid the cheers of the crowd, Roland held Anna's hand and walked step by step toward the staircase at one end of the hall. They passed through the overhead dome, and went up to the castle's balcony. Suddenly, there was a raging wave under the courtyard. Before he raised his hand to signal, the crowd, who had been waiting for a long time, had already expressed their respect. "Long live His Majesty! Long live the King! Long live the city of Neverwinter!" The deafening cheers went straight to the sky. The crowd seemed to be in an uproar. Ribbons and petals fell from the balcony and danced with the cold wind. For a moment, the momentum of the snow and ice was overshadowed. Chapter 1035. At the same time, the city of Glow. Hearing the noon bell, Horford Quinn put down the quill in his hand and looked to the southwest. The news of Wimbledon's coronation had not only spread throughout Grey Castle, but also a large number of propagandists in the Kingdom of Dawn. According to the leaflet, if there were no accidents, this was the time for the young man's coronation. It was too fast. Horford could not help sighing. He was a few years younger than his daughter, Andrea, but now he was the indisputable king of the kingdom. His influence had even crossed the border. Since the battle with the Moya family, some nobles in the king's city of the Kingdom of Dawn might not know the real name of Wimbledon III, but few people did not know the name Roland Wimbledon. At first, it was only circulated in the underground chamber of commerce. Later, anecdotes about this prince spread through various channels, like wildfire sweeping across the grassland. 3 years ago, he was just a lord of a remote town, and the least favored of all the members of the Wimbledon royal family. Such a rapid rise was like a fantasy. It was not an exaggeration to call him a monster. Many of his actions were unfathomable, like a monster. Take this coronation ceremony for example. Since ancient times, he was probably the only one who chose to hold a coronation ceremony in the winter when the months of demons were wreaking havoc. Usually, a king like this would only appear in times of turmoil or chaos. Thinking of the inside story of the Battle of Divine Will, he faintly felt that this world might usher in an earth-shaking upheaval. "Your Majesty," the guard interrupted his contemplation. "Sir Hillfox sent a letter." "Oh." Horford withdrew his gaze. "Open it and read it to me." "Yes." "Your Majesty" was indeed an intoxicating title. He had been the hand of the king for nearly 20 years and had called him Your Majesty countless times. He had long thought that he had developed a resistance to it, but when someone called him that, he could still feel something swelling in his heart. "Then I'll give my blessing to the King of Grey Castle." Horford knew very well that the reason he was able to sit in this position and make the other restless people back off was because he had the support of the neighboring countries. Those aristocratic families were not afraid of the sword and saber in the hands of Knight Quinn, but they were full of fear towards the world-destroying thunder. In this time of great change, tying the fate of the family to the war chariot of Grey Castle was the safest way. According to the letter, a mining team from Grey Castle has entered the border of the Kingdom of Dawn. They hope to receive your assistance and support. Inform Earl Luashi of this matter, and let him lead the knight group to welcome them, Horford quickly ordered. You also take my verbal order to inform all the lords on the way to provide all the necessary help to this team. Yes, Your Majesty. Archduke Island, Wolfheart Sea. Although this place was far away from the area affected by the months of demons, the passing wet and cold sea breeze still made the town appear bleak. Few people walked on the muddy streets, and only the dock area barely maintained some vitality. Therefore, an open-air wine shop set up next to the warehouse at the dock was particularly eye-catching. It mainly provided extremely cheap warm wine for sailors. Compared to the taverns that could shelter them from the wind and rain, passers-by generally just wanted to drink and dispel the chill in their stomachs. Very few people would stay after drinking, but at this moment, nearly 100 people gathered in front of the wine shop. It also attracted the attention of a woman in coarse clothes. "Farina?" someone whispered. "What are you looking at? We should go." "Demons," she replied. "What?" The latter's expression changed. "I heard someone mention demons," the woman called Farina repeated. "Wait a moment, Joe." The man hesitated for a moment, but finally lowered his head and replied in a very low voice, "Yes." "Your Majesty." "This is not an order." Farina waved her hand indifferently, and then moved a few steps closer to the crowd, hoping to hear more clearly. "I've never seen such terrible monsters. They have wings longer than humans and fangs as thick as arms. The city wall is nothing to them." The source of the voice seemed to be a sea merchant. The feeling of being surrounded by the crowd made him particularly proud, and his voice became louder and louder. "But this is not the most terrible thing. There is another kind of demon sitting on those demons. They look like humans, but much stronger than humans. The spears they throw seem to have eyes, fast and fierce, and even armor can't stop them. I'm not afraid of being laughed at, but I almost wet my pants at that time. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Are you serious? Doesn't that mean they are invincible? If they only stay in the sky, they can't touch them at all. There was also a small group of people who expressed disdain. You're just bluffing. Demons? Can you tell the difference between demonic beasts and demons? That's right. Go to the Hermes Plateau. There are all kinds of monsters there. I'm afraid that you will wet your pants so easily. Don't freeze your little brother. Bah, you know nothing. The sea merchant shouted. That's the name given by His Highness Roland Wimbledon. He has been in the western region for many years. How can he not know the difference between demonic beasts and demons? In my opinion, demonic beasts are a group of disorderly refugees, while demons are a well-trained army. Have you ever seen those beasts attack the city in batches and focus on different areas? If what you said is true, how could Grey Castle withstand it? You don't understand. It was indeed very dangerous at that time, but there was a flash of fire and lightning on the city wall, just like a raining hail. He spat. The demons exploded in the sky in the blink of an eye. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. One even fell in front of the hotel I temporarily stayed. The big hole in its chest was almost the size of a bowl. God knows how they did it. Even a bed crossbow can't have such power. According to what you said, the prince's strength is no different from that of God? Otherwise, how do you think he killed the church? Hearing this, Farina suddenly clenched her fists. Joe pressed down on her shoulder and shook his head at her silently. I know. She took a deep breath and let go of his hand. What do you think about this? The bloody moon hasn't appeared yet, so it's impossible for demons to appear in the barbarian land. However, his description of demons is similar to the records in the Holy Bible. It doesn't seem to be fabricated, so I can't tell. Joe paused and looked a little worried. However, these are all related to us. Unrelated. Farina interrupted. You're right, Joe. We have to solve our own problems first. After the death of acting Pope Tucker Tolden, she followed his will and evacuated the new holy city with the rest of the Judgment Army, intending to rebuild the church on Archduke Island in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. Archduke Island used to be the stronghold of the witch organization, the Bloodfang Association. After it was destroyed by the army of the church, the holy city stationed people there to prevent the witches from making a comeback. Archduke Island was an ideal place to settle down. However, they did not expect that the news of the holy city's destruction would spread faster than their footsteps. After learning that Hermes had fallen, the bishop of the Archduke Island no longer recognized the identity given by the church. He turned around and mixed with the nobles, becoming the Count of the Archduke Island. He even hanged the first messenger outside the city. This incredible betrayal dealt a heavy blow to the Judgment Army. After that, many people left the team. Now that they had been in Archduke Island for half a year, they could only hide like rats on the street. If they could not raise the church flag and reunite the people, she was afraid that the church would be completely destroyed in her hands. There was no doubt that the only way to save the precarious situation was to sacrifice the traitor. The difficulty was that the enemy also had a team of Scourge. This battle was bound to be extremely tragic. Let's go. Farina pulled up her hood and looked at the wine shop for the last time. The sea merchant was still talking. There are many interesting things there. For example, the black iron ship as big as a hill, the giant building taller than the Tower of Babel. As long as you go there once, you'll never forget it. Tell me all about it. I'll add more wine for you. Are these all the works of Prince Roland? Hey, of course, but you can't call him Prince anymore. When I left Neverwinter, he had decided to officially ascend the throne. As for the date, let me think. It should be today. Oh, so he's the king of Grey Castle now? Haha, that's a good title. The sea merchant raised his glass full of wine. Since it's such a coincidence, let me propose a toast to the faraway king of Grey Castle. A toast to the king of Grey Castle. Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. The king of Grey Castle? Farina sneered. You can continue to build your seemingly prosperous kingdom in the ravine. When the battle of divine will comes, this world will eventually become a ruin. Sooner or later, we'll meet again in the real hell. The only difference is who comes first and who comes last. If I can't defeat the traitor this time, I'll leave first. But if I win, I'll wait here quietly for the news of you falling into hell. Chapter 1036. At the source of the silver stream in the sand sea of the southernmost region, Brian was sitting in his tent, waiting for news from the front line. In front of him were Gwell's Burnflame, the chief of the Wildflame clan, and Thuram, the elder of the Wuxia clan. The two of them had now become the representatives of the Majin clan. Together with the commander of the gun battalion, who represented the great chief, all the leaders of the Sand Nation had gathered here. The cold wind in the desert made the tent flap noisily, but the inside of the tent was unusually warm. It was as if they were sitting on a huge brazier. No matter how cold it was on the surface, they could always feel the hot air gushing out when they put their feet in the salt sand. The effect was comparable to the firebeds and heaters in Neverwinter. The locals even invented something called a sand bed. They dug a shallow pit in the ground that was as wide as a person, and replaced the white salt sand with fine sand that had been sieved. Then they buried themselves in the sand to maintain their body temperature to the greatest extent possible. The fine sand was soft to the touch, and even more comfortable than a linen quilt. If one could pitch a tent above one's head, one could spend the whole winter comfortably. Unfortunately, it was this geothermal heat that destroyed the vitality of this place. The salt in the seawater constantly seeped out, turning the desert of about 100 kilometers into a snowy white. Not to mention flowers and trees. Even sandworms and poisonous scorpions were hard to see. Without an oasis, there was no source of food. Such a large plain was no different from a dead land. In terms of desolation, perhaps only the Blackwater Swamp was more desolate than the southernmost region. For hundreds of years, the Majin people had only built a few scattered wooden houses at the border of the saline alkali land to provide temporary shelter for those who came from afar to collect salt. But now the situation had changed. You're very calm, young man. Gwells suddenly broke the silence. The Wildwave clan and the Cutbone clan are both the most powerful clans in Iron Sand City. The great chief can easily defeat them, but it doesn't mean that those small tribes can do the same. Why are you so confident in them? Seeing that someone had started the conversation, Thuram hurriedly added. In the past year, no new tribe in Iron Sand City has been promoted to become one of the 6 major clans. Obviously, they control all the resources flowing into the city. But in the southernmost region, as long as there's enough food, the clans can quickly recover. I'm afraid they're even stronger than before you came here. Confidence? No. Brian shook his head slowly. I don't have such feelings for them. Then, why didn't you mobilize the great chief's troops? Thuram was a little surprised. We only need to dispatch 100 people. Together with the brave warriors of Wildflame and Wuxia, we'll definitely be able to stop these arrogant people from crossing the small oasis. And then, let the First Army patrol the Silver Stream Oasis forever, and act as the guardians of those small tribes? Brian looked at him. Do you think that's what His Majesty wants to see? This. Thuram was at a loss for words. Soon after the Great Relocation Plan was implemented, the development of the southernmost region was also initiated. In addition to the construction of the festive harbor at the Endless Cape, another focus was the saline alkali land at the source of the Silver Stream. Due to the lack of river channels, if they wanted to transport these shining white industrial resources out of the desert, they could only rely on a large amount of manpower and animal power to tow carts to the nearest tributary of the Redwater River. For this reason, the 2 cities of Fallen Dragon Ridge and Port of Clearwater offered generous conditions in order to attract enough sand people to join the sand-moving army. In just 1 year, there were many tents and people coming and going at the junction of the saline alkali land. Deep wells were dug one after another, and fresh water was drawn from the underground river of the Silver Stream, which was used to filter and purify the salt sand. Simple factories were also built. There was no gushing steam or roar of machines. Everything was done by the hands of people. The whole process was like gold panning. People gathered the wealth scattered among the millions of gravel and crystallized it into blocks. Then they loaded it into trucks and transported it to the hinterland of the western region, waiting for further processing. This repetitive and boring work became the new rhythm of the saline alkali land. Although there was still no oasis, sandworms, or poisonous scorpions, the place gradually became lively. The reward of not worrying about food and clothing attracted not only the migrants, but also the small tribes who had not made up their minds. They often came to the junction in groups, exchanging their physical strength for wheat, dried meat, and cloth. Some of them happily returned to the oasis with food, while others stayed and became one of the migrants. This phenomenon aroused the dissatisfaction of the big clans in Iron Sand City. The more tribes that left the oasis, the less resources they could get. The conflict finally broke out 2 months ago. The Wildwave and Cutbone clans dispatched their cavalry to kill a group of people from a small tribe that had set out from the oasis, and threw their heads on the road to the north. Obviously, they intended to warn other sand people of the Majin kingdom who were ready to make trouble. The big clans did not dare to make an enemy of the king of Grey Castle, so they aimed their butcher knives at the small tribes that had not yet surrendered. They might have thought that this would avoid the wrath of Thunder, the great chief. After all, no king of the northern kingdom would really care about the lives of hundreds of sand people. However, they did not expect that this move would directly touch the nerve of Neverwinter. Reducing the population for no reason was undoubtedly one of His Majesty's biggest taboos. Brian was well aware of this. Before Guel's letter arrived, the firearm battalion commander had already prepared to deal with it. What if they fail? Guel's burn fire rubbed his forehead. If I remember correctly, it has only been 3 months since they started training with firearms, right? Then they'll be killed, and their tribes will become slaves of Iron Sand City. Brian closed his eyes. Before we set out, I said that this battle is not for me, but for themselves. I've given them sharp weapons that can fight against the Iron Cavalry. If they still can't protect their tribes from the butcher knives of the enemy, then they don't deserve to be part of the army of Grey Castle. For me, it's just training a new group of people. Guels looked at Brian seriously for the first time, as if he had a new understanding of this young officer. Moreover, you've forgotten that 3 months is only the time for firearms training. He continued. In addition to firearms, they also have knives, daggers, fists, and teeth. These weapons have been trained since the moment the Sand People were born, haven't they? The members of the Sand Nation army that Brian had selected were all from the small tribes that were stationed here. They were different from large clans like Wildflame. Although they chose to stay at the front line of Grey Castle, they were still concerned about the tribes in the oasis. These people did not have a unified background, but they could form an invisible bond between the two places. They were the best source of soldiers for the local army, and the obsolete old flintlocks became their standard equipment. Suddenly, there was the sound of hurried footsteps outside the tent. Stop! The guard shouted. I'm Jodl from the ambush team. I have something to report to the battalion commander. Let him in. Brian opened his eyes suddenly. The curtain was lifted, and a man with blood all over his face stumbled in. He swayed a few times, and as if he could no longer support himself, he knelt on the ground on one knee. Although he was panting, his eyes were as bright as stars. Chapter 1037. When Brian walked out of the camp, the victorious soldiers were coming back one after another. Compared to the neat and tidy troops when they set out, they were now like a group of refugees. Their bodies were stained with blood, and not a single piece of their clothes was intact. There were either holes here or there, and it was obvious that such scars could only be left after an extremely intense close combat. In addition, the number of soldiers was even more shocking. Less than half of the 2,000 ambushers could walk back standing. In order to transport the wounded, no one rode on the horses or camels, and each horse had to carry 2 or 3 people. Coupled with the captives, the whole team was very scattered. From afar, it did not look like a well-trained army at all, but there was not a trace of depression on their faces. On the contrary, they seemed to be in high spirits, completely different from when they had set out for the battle. It was the first time in the southernmost region that a small tribe had defeated the big clans in the Iron Sand City. Brian knew that after this battle, they had truly transformed from hunters into soldiers. What made him even more satisfied was that although the ambushers were disheveled and their clothes were in tatters, they firmly remembered his instructions. No matter what, soldiers should never abandon their weapons. Most of their water and grain bags were missing, and some of them even lost half of their new shoes, but their guns and sabers were still hanging on their backs. The First Army could not guard the southern border for the Sand Nation forever. They had to rely on their own strength to keep the tribe running according to the order set by Grey Castle. This was only a superficial order from the King of Grey Castle. Brian knew that His Majesty wanted more than that. He needed more soldiers, and he needed the Majins to join the Battle of Divine Will in an organized manner. And now, these people had the qualifications to go one step further. The Flintlock Battalion commander turned around with satisfaction and nodded to Jottle. Now you can tell me the details of the battle. As far as the battle itself was concerned, there was nothing amazing about it. Instead, it was full of flaws and mistakes. According to the plan, the 2,000 Sand Nation people were divided into two groups. One group would pretend to be the bait and sneak back to the Silver Stream Oasis. Then they would march north along the Silver Stream at night to create the illusion that they wanted to sneak to the Saline Alkali land. The other group would set up an ambush at the last uninhabited oasis at the end of the Silver Stream. The Wild Wave and Cut Bone clans naturally would not allow a small tribe to challenge their authority. A group of more than 800 cavalrymen set off from the Iron Sand City and followed the footsteps to catch up with the traitors. Even though the bait had more people, they didn't care about the Sand Nation from a small tribe that couldn't even be considered watchdogs. The two teams, one fleeing and the other chasing, soon entered the ambush circle. This part was still going according to plan, but everything after that was a mess. The bait should first dismount and surrender. After tricking the other party into dismounting, they would then find an opportunity to scatter the horses, allowing the ambush team to attack. However, the Sand Nation who was in charge of sealing the road had ignited the fire in advance. As the fire soared into the sky, the enemies immediately realized that the situation was not good, and began to break through the encirclement in the direction they had come from. If they hadn't prepared a large amount of black water in advance, this ambush would have failed. After that, the battle turned into a chaotic dogfight. The bait group drew their swords and attacked the returning enemies, and the troops that were lying in ambush had no choice but to join in. Many of them had only fired one shot from the beginning to the end, and the previous training of taking turns to shoot and reload were completely useless. The way to determine the winner was still the Sand Nation's most traditional hand-to-hand combat. Just as Brian had said, they did not only have guns as their only weapon. Under the illumination of the fire and the neighing of the horses, this small oasis that was already in a shrunken state became a battlefield of life and death for both sides. Throwing oneself at a rider, or having one's intestines trampled by a horse's hooves was a common sight on the battlefield. When two people hugged each other, teeth could also take the opponent's life. It was not that the small tribes did not have warriors. The Sand Nation had to face an extremely harsh living environment from the moment they were born. Those who could survive the sandworms and poisonous scorpions had basically mastered excellent fighting skills. It could be said that in terms of individual strength, the gap between them and the big clans was not so great that they could not catch up. The disadvantage of these tribes was the lack of resources, which limited their reproduction and expansion. No matter how strong a warrior was, he could not defeat an enemy 10 times his size. As long as the tribal form did not change, it was difficult for them to compete with the big clans. But now this disadvantage did not exist anymore. The warriors of the Sand Nation came from dozens of Silver Stream tribes. They no longer had to fight for resources. Everyone ate the same food, wore the same clothes, trained together, and slept together. In the face of the powerful clans of Iron Sand City, the last thing they lacked was the courage and determination to break the rules. The massacre of the small tribes by the Wild Wave and the Cut Bone tribes happened to make up for this. The battle lasted from night until dawn. The Sand Nation army won the battle like a cornered beast. When the fire was extinguished, Only black charcoal was left in the oasis. Without the cover of the trees, the yellow sand would soon bury the water source here, making it completely disappear from the surface of the earth. The silver stream would shrink again until the next oasis was exposed to the erosion of sand and dust. But the Sand Nation people would survive. This battle was like a symbol. It sped up the disappearance of the oasis, but also pointed the way for the other Sand Nation people. After listening to Jodel's report, Brian walked up to the crowd. Well done. You have won honor for yourselves and a chance of survival for your tribes. This is a victory that belongs to you. You should decide how to deal with the spoils of war. He pointed at the warriors of the big clans who had been captured. Kill them. Sir, my family died in the hands of these people. I want them to pay with their lives. Under the expectant gaze of the Sand Nation people, Brian raised his right hand and gently waved it down. His meaning was self-evident. Then came the sound of blades being unsheathed. Hot blood immediately dyed the salt sand under his feet red. Like flower buds blooming in the snow, the high morale of the warriors reached its peak. But the threat from Iron Sand City has not been completely eliminated. Wildwave and Cutbone clans can still send troops to the hinterland of Silverstream at any time. Your people are still under their blades. Brian shouted. The Great Chief has given you the right to enjoy the Eternal Oasis, but the rebels want to destroy it all. Tell me, what should you do? Attack Iron Sand City and banish them to Blackwater Swamp. Let these people know the consequences of betraying the Great Chief. Battalion Commander, I still have friends in the Oasis. Please let them join this team. And me. My sisters can also fight. The crowd instantly burst into cheers. The power contained in the cheers made Gwels and Thuram involuntarily take a step back. Brian looked in the direction of Neverwinter. Your Majesty, the rebels have used their own blood to decorate your coronation ceremony. The scattered Majins are gradually coming together. I think it won't be long before Iron Sand City comes under your control. But this is just the beginning. The entire southernmost region will eventually be in your hands. In this desert, there will no longer be anyone who will resist your will. Chapter 1038. The carnival of the coronation ceremony lasted from noon to night. More than 10 huge pots were set up in the central square, which were filled with fragrant soup. Under the boiling water, all kinds of seasonings and oil were piled up around the pot, which was as thick as a finger. Anyone could throw food into the pot, cook it, and then take it out to enjoy. In a situation where most spices were still luxuries, this kind of banquet was obviously very attractive to them. Some people even brought pots and barrels, hoping to take the rich oil soup back home and slowly taste it. Of course, the city hall would also constantly add new soup and seasonings. When the chopped beef bones and sausages were poured into the pot, the crowd would burst into a burst of high-pitched cheers. In the past months of the demons, such a scene was almost unimaginable. The long winter made people be careful even when they exhaled hot air, because every loss of body temperature meant that they were one step closer to death. But now, they could shout to their heart's content amidst the falling snowflakes and vent the passion in their chests without any worries, because they knew that the physical strength and temperature consumed could be replenished at any time. There was no need for deliberate guidance. People spontaneously raised hot food in the direction of the castle, offering blessings and songs of praise for the new king's coronation. Sylvie withdrew her gaze and moved it back to the castle hall. The banquet here was also very lively. Fine wine, delicacies, music, laughter, everything that one could wish for was there. When Roland and Anna appeared hand in hand in their new clothes, it caused a lot of people to exclaim in admiration. It was the first time that Sylvie saw such a style of wedding dress. It was completely different from the white dress worn by the chief knight at his wedding. If the former resembled an evening dress, then the latter seemed to be completely designed by Roland. The color scheme of the dress was mainly red and gold, with long sleeves and skirt, and 2 ribbons full of patterns hanging from the shoulders, which looked complex and luxurious. Logically speaking, such a bright outfit could easily overshadow the owner's appearance, but it was just right for Anna. She was the master of flames, and with her strong comprehension ability, she was the most dazzling witch even among the witches, and the bright red color of her outfit further highlighted this point. In addition, the loose design of her clothes gave her a dignified and calm feeling, which was just right for her identity as a queen. Everyone raised their glasses to the two, and Roland and Anna responded with a smile. It could be said that this was a perfect dinner. But Sylvie could not relax at all, because she saw some strange signs at the ceremony. As the owner of the Eye of Magic, she was always the first line of defense in the alert circle, providing timely warnings to the follow-up guards. At such a critical time as the coronation ceremony, it was even more important to strive for absolute safety, whether it was out of her own ideas, or because of her relationship with Princess Tilly. She hoped that Roland could be safe, so naturally, she would not easily let go of these clues. Individually, each of the signs did not seem to be important, but when put together, they formed a thought-provoking puzzle. This could not help but remind Sylvie of a song that His Majesty occasionally hummed. The lyrics explained by the other party were quite interesting. Things like the scorched cane, the abrupt subtle fragrance of flowers, and many seemingly irrelevant fragments eventually led to a deliberately buried truth. By the way, after Mystery Moon heard this song, it had become the song of the detective group. And it seemed to be the situation at that time. Although it was not clear what the problem was, if it was in normal times, she would have notified Nightingale and Ashes to be vigilant. But at this moment, Sylvie still maintained her silence, because she suddenly remembered what Anna said to her 2 days ago. The person who can prevent the secret from being revealed. Often only the person who knows the secret can do it. On this point, I need your help. At that time, she did not really understand the meaning of the words, so she did not pay too much attention to it. Until today, she suddenly understood that this sentence was like the last stroke of a jigsaw puzzle. Once it was completed, the whole picture would have meaning. She had peeped into a secret. This did not make Sylvie feel happy, but instead she felt a great deal of pressure. Because now not only did she need to keep this secret, but she also had to prevent others from discovering the traces of the secret. Those scattered strange signs. It was very likely that she was not the only one who had noticed. Sylvie swept the entire hall, and the focus of her observation fell on 3 targets. Achoo! Lorgar rubbed her nose, a suspicious expression on her face. What's wrong? Andrea teased. So wolves can also catch a cold. I don't know if there is something wrong with my nose, but I have been having this illusion since this morning. Lorgar sniffed left and right. The smell in the hall seems to be somewhat inconsistent. It doesn't add up? Ashes interrupted. Can you identify everyone's smell, and then match it with the person who has the smell? That's right, Roland said. As long as they are not too far away, or are disturbed by strong odors, Lorgar nodded. There are nearly 100 people in the hall now. Andrea obviously did not believe it. Even if your nose is sensitive, it is impossible to remember so many smells at the same time. Moreover, many people use perfume, and there is physical contact like this, Andrea said, touching the back of the extraordinary's hand with the hand that had just grabbed the chicken leg. I will also be stained with her strange smell. Under such circumstances, you can distinguish it? It is indeed difficult. But it is one thing to distinguish accurately, and another thing is whether there is a smell or not. Lorgar drooped her ears in confusion. Obviously everyone is standing in the same place. Why do several smells come and go intermittently? Ahem, Sylvie's voice suddenly sounded behind the 3 of them. This should be a disease. Sylvie? Andrea raised her eyebrows. Why are you here? I was walking around and happened to hear your conversation. Andrea shrugged and looked at the wolf girl. The climate of the western region is different from that of the southern desert, and it is very easy to be infected by the cold plague, not to mention this is your first winter here, so it is normal that you are not used to it. If you feel that your nose is not clear, ask Lily for a glass of purifying water, and you will be fine. I was often like this when I first came here. Really? Lorgar suddenly understood. I see. After leaving the 3 of them, Sylvie breathed a little sigh of relief. Because of her ability, Lorgar Burnflame had a far better sense of hearing and smell than ordinary people. Coupled with her beast-like insight, she was the target that needed to be watched all the time. Fortunately, she had stopped them in time to get closer to the secret trail. And the second key target was, coo 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 coo. Coo. Maggie, who was squatting on top of Lightning's head, was talking to Joan excitedly. Yeah. The latter also responded cheerfully, and as they talked back and forth, they seemed to be talking about a particularly interesting topic. No, forget it. Sylvie put her hand on her forehead. Even if they found out something, she would not be able to detect it. Fortunately, it was also impossible for others to get any clues from it. Thinking of this, she focused her attention on the third person through the eye of magic. And that person was the most likely to find out the secret, and also the most difficult one. Chapter 1039. As a key figure in Greycastle Weekly, Honey's informants were everywhere, and she had the advantages of both Lorgar and Maggie. The olive grove in the backyard of the castle was like her base camp, and it was not easy to avoid her detection. If that was all, it would be fine. Because she was always the first to know the interesting anecdotes in the city, her gatherings usually attracted many witches. For example, now the witches around Honey were the most concentrated group in the hall. Not to mention Mystery Moon and her detective group, Nightingale, Vendy, and Scroll were not easy to fool. Even Leaf, who had not shown up for a long time, appeared in the crowd and seemed to be talking to Honey. Hide the secrets you know and keep the secrets. Sylvie glanced at Anna at the other end of the hall, and thinking of her words, she had to bite the bullet and walk over. How are these birds? Leaf's voice quickly came to her ears. I found a new species in the depths of the misty forest. They are not big, but they fly very fast and are very bold. One of them dares to peck at a gray eagle that steals its nest. I thought you might need them, so I brought a nest of them back. There were 2 big and 1 small kingfishers standing on Leaf's shoulder, and they were intimately rubbing against Leaf's cheek. They were not as brave as she had described. Of course, thank you. Honey happily held the birds in her hands. I haven't seen you for a long time. I feel that you can be a bird trainer. They probably treat me as a part of the forest. Leaf smiled. By the way, I'm really surprised by the changes in the city. There are a lot of new houses, magic movies, and newspapers. If it weren't for the fun of exploring the depths of the forest, I would be envious of you. You should come back more often, Vendy said softly. Everyone misses you. I miss you guys too. Leaf lowered her eyes. But only the southeast edge of the misty forest is under the control of the heart of the jungle. I need to be one with the forest for a long time to adapt to the expanding consciousness. If we want to control the entire forest before the war arrives, we have no other choice but to seize the remaining time. You've worked hard too. Scroll lovingly stroked her hair. In the future, I'll ask Lightning to send you the new newspaper every week. Then you'll know what's happening in Neverwinter at any time. That's a good idea, Mystery Moon exclaimed. But what's written in the newspaper is what everyone knows. Compared to that, I'm more interested in the secrets that only a few people know. She looked at Honey and said, if you find anything, remember to inform the detective group. We have the most powerful explorer here, and we promise to solve all the mysteries for you. Hearing the word secret, Sylvie's heart jumped to the top. This idiot, asking too directly. What should she do to divert the topic? No. It was too difficult for her to avoid the attention of Nightingale and Vendy at the same time while stealthily diverting Mystery Moon's attention. Well, there are indeed a lot of them. Honey tilted her head and said, oh. Mystery Moon's eyes lit up and she hurriedly asked, for example? Big crisis, Sylvie thought to herself. Is it useful to pretend to be unconscious or drunk? I don't have such acting skills at all. Sorry, Anna, I've tried my best. Well, although I'm also very curious, I can't say it out. Honey stuck out her tongue. In particular, I can't tell His Majesty. This is Sister Vendy's request. She also said that no matter what kind of vision you find, you must report it to her first. Huh. Mystery Moon looked at Vendy in surprise. This is not fair. Vendy coughed twice and said, I'm doing this for the sake of the Witch Union. It's safer for you not to know some things. Sylvie let out a long sigh of relief. In this way, the last crisis had been resolved. She had successfully kept this secret. Right? Thus, Sylvie spent the most difficult dinner party of her life in such a perturbed state. After the dinner, Roland took Anna back to the bedroom. Now it had been decorated into their wedding room. In the flickering candlelight, the girl's figure in the phoenix coronet and red robe seemed a lot more hazy, but it also added a different kind of softness and beauty. He walked up to her, gently took off the coronet on top of her head, pulled up the ends of her hair, and looked into her eyes. In that pair of lake-like clear eyes, he saw ripples of affection. "Call me by my name, okay? Anna." "No." She blinked. "My full name. Anna Wimbledon. Call me again." "Anna Wimbledon. Can you call me 10 times? Roland chuckled. "As many times as you want." After listening to him calling her by her ear, Anna finally lowered her head with some embarrassment. "Am I a little strange?" "It is a little." Roland scratched her nose. "In the future, this name will make your ears grow calluses. And even if you don't have a surname, you are still my wife." In his original world, marriage did not require one party to change their surname, so he did not care too much about the name after marriage. "Even so, I feel like I am complete this way." Anna pressed her chest. "It's like I'm finally not alone anymore. This is probably the meaning of the ceremony. Whether it is wearing the coronet or changing the title, it is all an additional external change to obtain a kind of self-recognition. Although the feelings between people do not need to be verified by the ceremony, if this link is missing, you will definitely feel pity and regret when you look back on it later." Roland could not help but reach out and hug her. At this time, any answer seemed redundant. After the two of them cuddled for a while, Anna said, "Roland, can I make a request of you?" If he remembered correctly, this was the first time she took the initiative to make a request of him. "Yes, go ahead. I want to be your Minister of Industry." Roland was a little surprised. "That's not a problem, but why do you suddenly?" "Because I'm just an ordinary girl from a remote town," Anna said with a smile. "Now that I suddenly become the Queen of Grey Castle, there must be a lot of people who are dissatisfied, right?" "Don't worry, no one will dare to say anything about this," Roland comforted her. "If everything is settled by you, it will only continue to increase the suspicion." She shook her head. "I can't hide behind you like before, only indulging in the things that interest me. I want to do more, to make people speechless from the front." From an unknown witch to a person who could stand on her own? Roland could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. "I never planned to let you stay in that narrow backyard." "As you wish, my dear. Thank you for agreeing to be willful." Anna tiptoed and kissed his forehead gently. "By the way, haven't you always been curious about what I talked about with Nightingale that night?" Roland slightly paused. "It would be a lie to say that I'm not curious, but it's okay." She smiled. "That was a promise, and it has been fulfilled. Now, carry me up." The candle was extinguished by a wisp of black flame, and the night was like a veil, covering the outline of the two of them. It was a hazy but beautiful night. Chapter 1040. Roland held the third plenary meeting in the castle's reception hall the day after he officially ascended the throne. The main topic of the meeting was the distribution of power that the officials were most concerned about. As supporters of the right side, this was undoubtedly the moment they had been looking forward to for a long time. Working for a local lord and working for a king were two completely different concepts, especially since most of them had worked in City Hall and had a basic understanding of the new king's centralization of power by weakening the local and strengthening the central. This promotion was even more important. This meant that they would become central officials of the Grey Castle Kingdom, no longer managing the western region, and their influence could be said to be stronger than that of the great nobles in the past. Naturally, Roland would not allow this kind of instant success sentiment to continue to swell in his team of officials. Therefore, at the beginning of the meeting he put the general principles at the forefront. "First of all, I would like to congratulate all of you. Those who are invited to this meeting will become part of the elite of Grey Castle. In the next few decades, you will govern this kingdom together with me." "You flatter me, Your Majesty." Barav took the lead to stand up, put his hand on his chest and bowed. It's our honor to serve you. If there's anything you need, please tell me. I'll do it without hesitation. Although he spoke humbly, the old director's face was already wrinkled from the smile. Obviously, he was full of expectations for the future. Roland nodded with a smile and gestured for everyone to sit down. Then he said slowly, "But there's one thing I have to say first. Taking back the feudal power of the nobles is to replace them with capable people. The prosperity of a kingdom depends on how many outstanding people are fighting for it. So I don't want to see you become another kind of nobles." "Of course," Barav hurriedly said. "No one can guarantee that the descendants will have the same talents. All positions should be given to the best." His words immediately drew a chorus of agreement. Not knowing if it was an illusion, Roland felt that these city hall officials had changed a lot from before. Even their flattery was much smoother, and there was an inexplicable awe in their eyes. This difference gave him a vague sense of pleasure. This was probably the function of the ritual. It was no wonder that Timothy and Garcia would not hesitate to drag more than half of the kingdom into the flames of war in order to obtain this position. However, Roland did not allow himself to be immersed in this emotion for too long. Even if he was the supreme king, he only governed a corner of the vast continent. If he was satisfied with this, then what difference was there between him and some unknown chieftain of an isolated island? The world was so big that he wanted to see it. What you said is just the most basic point. Roland looked around the hall. In fact, no one can guarantee that a capable person will always be qualified for his position. The temptations of the outside world, the solidification of one's thoughts, and the swelling of one's desires could all destroy one's future. You are no exception. As he raised his voice, the officials all lowered their heads, not daring to breathe loudly. Therefore, entering the center is just the beginning. Your abilities and achievements will be comprehensively evaluated every year. After that, whether you will be promoted or stagnate will be determined by the evaluation. Roland paused for a moment. Of course, there will be worse results. For example, those who know that they can't do it, but still cause losses to the kingdom, will be stripped of their positions and sent to the court of justice. "Your Majesty," Barav asked cautiously, "may I know who will write this evaluation?" "I'll be responsible for it." Roland looked at him. Any other questions? Although the real investigator was Nightingale from the Security Bureau, it was more appropriate to carry out the investigation in his name. "No, I have no more questions." "I know what you're thinking," Roland continued. "It's not easy to get to this point. It should be the time to reap the rewards. If you have to walk on thin ice and keep working hard in the future, then what's the point of becoming a Central Hall official? What I want to say is, the rewards don't conflict with the above. Instead, it's a symbiotic relationship. As long as you can complete the tasks I give you, I don't mind you making profits for yourself. It's like dividing bread. The bigger the bread, no matter how little you get, you can still fill your stomach. The smaller the bread, even if you eat it alone, you will only get a little. As for the reason that those who stand at the front will get the bread more easily, I think you all know that. The resources that a high-ranking official could obtain were far more than just the salary on the surface. His connections and power were all more efficient capital. If he couldn't even see this point, he didn't need such a person to continue to stay in the city hall. The driving effect of the stick and carrot combination had been verified by the river of history. Although he was still very unfamiliar with it, Roland had begun to familiarize himself with it. "Before I announce new appointments and removals, you can still choose to give up. Those who quit will get a large amount of golden dragon as compensation, enough for you to squander for the rest of your life. But once you decide to stay, you have to shoulder the responsibilities and obligations of an official. Now make your decision." No one stood up. Even Kyle Sichi, the Minister of Chemical Industry, who complained incessantly at the beginning and wanted to resign as soon as possible, remained silent. Apparently, his 2 years of experience in politics had taught him that the position of minister was especially important if he wanted to extract funds from Barav. "Very well." Roland smiled. "Now let's announce your appointments and removals." Compared with the previous city hall, The biggest change in the new regime was that it included the towns in the other territories. He directly adopted the modern division method and set the big cities as provinces, governing the towns, villages, and other residential areas in the surrounding areas. The governor, who had the same rank as the minister, was in charge of the provinces. Each province needed to set up a provincial city hall, and its department was responsible for the City Hall of Neverwinter. This system was based on the previous second-level City Hall, so it wasn't difficult to implement. The only difference was that the workload of the minister would be greatly increased. Correspondingly, the minister's power would also increase by one level. Bear of Herman was promoted to the head of the hand of the king as he wished. He was in charge of the Ministry of Finance, and was also responsible for coordinating the work of the various departments. As the first batch of managers of Border Town, and the old director who had trained the most talents for the city hall, this position could not be more suitable. For years ago, Roland had casually mentioned it, but now it had become a reality. In addition to the City Hall of King's City, the Army, the Security Bureau, and the Witch Union, Roland had also established a brand new department, the General Staff. Different from the staff organization that specialized in military operations, the General Staff was also responsible for formulating foreign policies. Anything related to strategic plans would be formulated by the General Staff. With the continuous expansion of Greycastle's power and the threat of the Battle of Divine Will, the relationship between Greycastle and the Kingdom of Dawn, the Kingdom of Wolfheart, the Kingdom of Everwinter, and the Fjords would inevitably become closer. Roland needed an organization with a broad vision to assist him in controlling the overall situation. Chapter 1041. After the announcement, everyone took the oath of office as per Roland's request. It was the first time for the officials to see such a process, but they still did it meticulously. Many of them even puffed out their chests. There was nothing special in the oath itself. To be faithful to the king and to do his duty was what every courtier used to say. But when it was uttered in such a formal place, in the presence of all, it seemed to take on a form, and to take on a meaning that could not be ignored. Roland knew that they were gradually becoming one. Now that you've passed the inauguration ceremony, it's time to get to work. He stood up from the main seat, and patted the big map on the wall behind him. Eliminate the demons from the fertile plains, ensure the safety of the northwest of Neverwinter, and lay the foundation for humans to return to the hinterland of the continent. This is the main goal of Greycastle next year. The two defeats in the Battle of Divine Will had forced them into a desperate situation. Behind them was the sea, and there was no way out. Whether it was in terms of survival resources or strategic significance, advancing westward was the only way out. If they wanted to gain a foothold on the vast plains, they had to pull out the nail that was Tequila. Without the Godstone mine, the demons could not erect the obelisk, and Greycastle could truly have a safe frontline territory. After that, whether it was to concentrate on development or wait for an opportunity to counterattack, the initiative would be in their hands. After all, humans did not need to rely on the red mist to move. When the technological power reached a qualitative change, the attack range of weapons would also be greatly improved. Yes, Your Majesty, the officials said in unison. After the meeting, Roland returned to his office. Nightingale had already made a cup of black tea and placed it on his desk. Thank you for your hard work. She still looked relaxed, and the dried fish trembling at the corner of her mouth showed that she was in a good mood. Ah, thank you. Roland picked up the fragrant teacup and suddenly thought of what Anna had said last night. He could not help but look at her again. As for what the agreement was, Anna had never explained in detail. However, Nightingale had been with everyone during the coronation ceremony in the morning and the wedding banquet in the evening, so it didn't look like she could fulfill the agreement. This riddle was really hard for him to understand. Moreover, Roland faintly felt that if he asked them directly, neither of them would give him the real answer. What happened? Just then, Nightingale's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Do I look good today? No. He quickly took a sip of tea to hide his absent-mindedness. I mean, you're right. So is it yes or no? The latter bent down and put her face in front of his. Roland could even smell the fragrance coming from her hair. Your heart is in a mess. Before he could reply, Nightingale had already left in a flash. She leaned back on the recliner and began to happily chew on the dried fish. Realizing that she was teasing him, Roland shook his head helplessly, but at the same time he felt lucky. Anyway, at least he was sure of one thing. She was still the Nightingale that he was familiar with. Western region, above the wild snowfield. What's the current speed? There was no answer. Lightning's ears were filled with the howling of the wind. It was very difficult to even open her mouth. If she spoke against the wind, her tongue would probably be torn apart by the knife-like turbulence. She had to operate her magic and activate synchronization. In an instant, the bone-chilling coldness disappeared from her face, and the noise of the wind dropped to a bearable level. Maggie, what's the current speed? She asked again. Let me see, Ku. The latter poked half of her head out from the collar under her neck. Almost twice as fast as a gray eagle Ku. Probably related to the instinct of a beast, Maggie had an excellent sense of speed. Compared to estimating speed based on magic consumption, it was obviously more convenient to fly with her. 300 kilometers per hour? Lightning sighed slightly. When a gray eagle swooped down from a high altitude, its speed could reach up to 150 kilometers per hour. Few targets could escape such an attack. Now she had far surpassed the gray eagle, but in her heart, she was somewhat not happy. 300 kilometers. This was already the limit of flying without relying on synchronization. Since the evolution of her ability, she spent a lot of time familiarizing herself with her new ability and mastered the active control of magic synchronization. In other words, as long as she could endure the various discomforts of high-speed flying, she could always keep the consumption to a minimum. In this regard, His Majesty also updated her with a full set of equipment, such as a circular mirror windshield, a double-layer thermal insulation lining, and a close-fitting backpack with less resistance. It could be said that the limit of weight had been achieved to the extreme. This series of measures allowed her to continuously break her own flying record, but the limitations of her body still existed. Now it seemed that 300 kilometers per hour might be an insurmountable hurdle. Once he used synchronization, the rate at which he consumed his mana would increase dramatically. Lightning could not help but envy the strong body of an extraordinary. Of course, the ability had been determined the moment it was awakened, and the only thing she could rely on was hard work. Perhaps after returning to Neverwinter, she could ask Lorgar for advice on how to train a stronger body. Watch out, Ku, Maggie suddenly shouted in her arms. We're less than 100 kilometers away from the Tequila ruins. I see. Lightning closed her eyes and carefully felt the storage of magic in her body. Then she curled up the corner of her mouth and said, "Then let's give the demons a surprise." After mastering the new ability, His Majesty finally agreed to her search for game. No, to investigate. Even at the lowest cruising speed, she was far faster than those clumsy devil beasts. As long as she planned her magic well, the possibility of encountering danger was very small. However, Lightning was not satisfied with this. She still remembered the embarrassing scene 3 years ago when she first explored the barbarian land, and was scared out of her wits by the demon ice sculpture in the stone tower ruins. As an explorer, he had actually lost to his guts. Such humiliation had to be compensated. Fear came from the unknown. For her, the demons were no longer scary monsters. Lightning, go all out. Hearing this, the pigeon immediately shrank its head into its collar. The little girl began to increase her speed. Even with the protection of synchronicity, she could feel the sharp increase in the sound of the wind, which turned from a sharp screech to a deep roar. The white land seemed to have turned into a pool of sticky milk. Not only did the outline of the land become blurred, but it also became more and more obvious that the land was flowing backward. Until the moment came, with a loud noise, everything fell silent. She seemed to have broken free from the shackles of the world. The wind and snow were left behind, and she could swim freely in the whole sky. In His Majesty's words, she had become the guide of sound. No matter how many times she repeated it, Lightning would not feel tired. She even felt that she was born for this moment. A few minutes later, the Tequila ruins appeared at the end of the horizon. However, to her surprise, the land around the ruins suddenly changed color. At first glance, it looked like the muddy soil after the snow had melted. But when she took a closer look, she found that it was a mixture of flesh and blood. The dark demonic beasts pressed down on the tequila ruins from the end of her sight, like a tide hitting the demon's defense line. Chapter 1042. This is. Lightning could not help but widen her eyes and slow down. The demonic beasts numbered in the tens of thousands and formed a wide black carpet on the snowfield. Their moving bodies reminded her of ants gnawing on corpses. But this time, they were not facing corpses at their mercy, but the equally brutal demons. The skeletal monsters, which were as tall as the miracle building, moved slowly among the demonic beasts. It seemed that they were being pushed by the enemies, but with every step they took, several demonic beasts who could not dodge in time would be trampled into meat paste. Compared to their size, the four twisted legs were as slender as tree branches. But the little girl knew that if she looked closely, the monster's limbs were probably even thicker than Ms. Agatha's mage tower. Many mad demons attached themselves to its abdomen and launched wave after wave of spear attacks. The demonic beasts could only bite the bullet and move forward, unable to effectively fight back. Magic parasites. She could not help but think of this title. It was a deformed demon between the living and the dead. It did not have a fixed body and lived between the skeletons and black stones like a tumor, relying on magic power to attack or move. The new spider demons in the Battle of the Northbound Slope and the behemoth in front of her now were probably the same kind of demon. No matter how sharp their fangs were, they would basically meet the same end if they hit the stones. Helpless, the demonic beasts could only bypass the skeletal monsters and attack the main force in the rear. Without the protection of the city wall, it should be a fierce battle. However, the berserk beasts might have the upper hand against unarmed humans, but they were clearly powerless against the mad demons who had outstanding strength and speed. Although there were many hybrids among them, the demons had also put the Lord of Hell, the siege beasts, and the spider demons in the front line. The speed at which they killed the hybrids was not much slower than that of the first army. Obviously, the demonic beasts outnumbered the demons by several times, but the latter still had the upper hand. Maggie probably realized that she had slowed down, so she poked her head out again. Seeing such a shocking scene, she could not help but gasp. The demonic beasts are fighting with the demons, coup? This must be the reason why Neverwinter has been so peaceful this year during the months of demons. Lightning pretended to be mature and said, "But there is one thing that is very strange. Didn't the ancient tequila witches say that demonic beasts always come looking for the relics of the gods? If I were the Devil King, I definitely wouldn't bring the relics to this wasteland where there was nothing. In other words, there should be another reason for them to gather here. It's a pity that Sylvie can't travel with us. Otherwise, we would definitely be able to gather more information." Maggie tilted her head. "Do you still want to surprise them?" "Of course," Lightning said without hesitation. "We're so close to the tequila ruins, but the devil beasts haven't come looking for trouble, which means they don't have time to pay attention to the surroundings. This is a great opportunity for us." There was no doubt that the demons and demonic beasts were all enemies of His Majesty. If they could make the monsters fight more fiercely, it would also relieve some pressure on the expedition plan after the beginning of spring. She roughly estimated the magic power in her body. If she flew at a speed faster than the speed of sound, she could probably hold on for about 3 to 4 minutes. To be on the safe side, it was absolutely safe to leave half of her magic power for escape. In the remaining 2 minutes, if they wanted to shake the demon's defense line, it was crucial to choose a flying position. The little girl set her eyes on the skeletal monsters. These huge deformed structures looked like crooked benches from afar. Their bodies were made of flat black stone bones, which were quite similar to the glider runways built by His Majesty on the coast of the East Sea. They were simply ideal targets for a low-altitude pass. According to the results of her ability test, the lower she was from the ground, the more damage she could cause. If she could fly close to the enemies, the mad demon in their abdomen would definitely be greatly affected. Since her high awakening, His Majesty had forced her to instill a lot of high-speed flying principles into her mind. She also learned that the explosion of energy when crossing the sound barrier had a lot to do with the size of the body. If it was Maggie who exceeded the speed of sound in the sky above Neverwinter on the day of her awakening, the whole city would probably suffer. Therefore, the little girl did not plan to defeat the demons in one fell swoop. She just needed to let the mad demon slow down its attack. As there was a death zone right under the skeletal monsters, the demonic beasts had to move to the sides, which greatly hindered their advancement. Without these unscrupulous enemies, the demon's defense line would definitely be under greater pressure. Even if the plan did not succeed, it would not affect her at all. After making the decision, Lightning pressed Maggie's head into her arms and swooped down toward the nearest skeletal monster. At that moment, she had completely thrown Roland's advice to the back of her mind. No one could catch the tail of the sound. It was time to show the demons her real flying skills. She covered the distance of several kilometers in the blink of an eye. When she appeared above the battlefield, she had already entered the realm of silence. But that was only in her eyes. In the eyes of the demons, there was a sudden rumble of thunder in the sky, and it kept pressing down on the ground. It was the explosion caused by the collision between the front and the rear. When Lightning changed her direction and flew 5 meters above the skeletal monster, the explosion turned the snow into clouds of white mist, almost covering the whole body of the monster. The deafening explosion made the demons roar in pain. But she had no time to observe the effect, because there were 5 other similar targets waiting for her on the battlefield. Just when she was about to fly over the 3rd skeleton monster, something unexpected happened. She saw a figure suddenly appear on the bare platform. No one noticed where it came from, but the moment it stood there, it instantly captured all of her attention. Although they were separated by a long distance, Lightning felt a chill run down her spine, and even her fingers could not help but tremble. It was a demon, but it had a very similar appearance to a human. Except for the blue skin, there was almost no other difference. Its facial features were extraordinary, and its golden eyes seemed to be deeper than the abyss of hell. Just by looking at it, Lightning felt like a frog being stared at by a poisonous snake. She felt instinctive fear from the bottom of her heart. What kind of monster is this? She could feel the surging magic power of the demon, which was so strong that it even distorted the surrounding vision. This kind of oppression was almost tangible. She was obviously flying at a high speed, but she felt like she was in a sticky quagmire, and she was getting closer and closer to it. Run. Run. The consciousness in her mind warned her that she could not fly anymore. She must run away immediately. But her body could not move at all, as if it was completely out of her control. And the demon slowly raised its right arm towards her. At this moment, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her chest. It was as if someone had driven a nail straight into her body. It was Maggie. As the pain spread throughout her body, her limbs instantly returned to her control, and even the passage of time returned to normal. Chapter 1043. Your Majesty, this is this week's financial situation. Barav put away the report in his hand and said excitedly, all in all, the trend of the increase is better than expected. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a sharp increase. If it were in the past, this would definitely be a miracle. Well done. Roland leaned back in his chair, looking much calmer than Barav. He naturally knew what the old minister meant by a miracle. Ignoring the impact of the months of the demons, the population and the economy had grown faster than in the summer and autumn, which should have been the peak season, as if the heavy snow outside the window did not exist. For the people of this era, this report completely subverted common sense. After all, when winter came, people's activities changed from accumulation to consumption, just like hibernation, and it was common for economic performance to be poor. In the past, Border Town had been directly abandoned, and there were no people there, so how could there be trade and production? But he knew that the nature of hibernation was just a compromise to the environment. Human beings could stand out from thousands of other creatures by relying on their ability to transform the environment. The never-weary cement boats that ignored the wind broke the barrier of the snowbound territory, The heating system and the medical hospitals solved people's worries, and the work in the factory was even more fearless of the wind and snow. When the environmental restrictions were gradually broadened, the day would come sooner or later. In addition, the coronation ceremony and the establishment of the new king's city were also a major reason for the increase in the data. People always liked to go to the lively places, which had not changed for thousands of years. Nowadays, the wide Redwater River seemed a little crowded. The number of cement boats made in Neverwinter had already exceeded the 500 mark a year ago, and the template had also been developed from the original flat transport boat to a variety of models. By reserving slots, the upper hull of the boat could be quickly installed for passenger and commercial use, which was favored by many chambers of commerce. Coupled with the business opportunities of large-scale population migration, cement boats also appeared in the docks of other cities. Since the news of the coronation spread, there were 500 to 600 people arriving in Neverwinter every day through the river. A year ago, Barav thought it was impossible to achieve a goal of 100,000 people, but now the total population of the western region was close to 200,000, 90% of which were in Neverwinter. This also caused the new king's city to be completely different from other traditional cities. It did not have majestic city walls, nor was it divided into inner and outer city districts. Instead, it was divided into circles and circles of streets that continuously expanded outwards, like a forest of houses. Due to the similarity in the style of the houses and the lack of exquisite and luxurious buildings, Neverwinter was also criticized by many people. However, when these words fell into Roland's ears, they all became another kind of praise. Otherwise, how could Neverwinter withstand the rapid population growth? 200,000 was the total number of permanent residents in the rest of the cities. If they had to surround the city with walls and build a few more exquisite buildings such as cathedrals, clock towers, and palaces, it would probably take a few decades to complete. Population was the foundation of industrialization, the guarantee of more factories, and the prerequisite for economic prosperity. As for aesthetics, it was not within his consideration at all. Or rather, in his eyes, the rows of steaming chimneys were much more beautiful than the magnificent palaces. Considering the lag in the spread of news, next year's growth should be even more astonishing. Keep up the good work, and you'll get the reward you deserve. Being the hand of the king is the best reward I can get. Besides, these changes are all due to your wise decision. I'm just following your instructions, Barav said, stroking his beard proudly. Roland could not help shaking his head in amusement. Do you have anything else to report? Ah, yes, Your Majesty. The old director hurriedly took out 2 letters from his bosom. Although these 2 letters are addressed to the administrative office, I think only you can make a decision. Oh, Roland took the letters. The name of the sender of the first letter was quite familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. Cajun Fells? Mr. Cajun is a master of drama in the Old King's City. He once came to Neverwinter with a troupe to present a new play for your grand ceremony, but you didn't agree, Barav reminded him. It suddenly occurred to Roland that he had first heard of this name from the businesswoman Marjorie. When asked who was the most familiar person in King's City, he blurted out the name of the magic hand, which was quite embarrassing. Before the coronation ceremony, an official from the administrative office had indeed reported this to him, and presented him with the script as if it was a treasure. However, Roland had refused the official's request after a few glances. Not to mention that the magic movie starring Lorgar was the highlight that he had been preparing for a long time. This boring palace love story was enough to make people doze off. Before he left behind a letter. Although I don't think it's necessary to disturb you with such a small matter. But he's a famous person after all. Do you think? The old butler's voice became softer and softer, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. Roland also understood what he was implying. The letter was dated almost a week ago, and the fact that he had waited until now to give it to Roland was enough to show that the old director had put in a lot of effort. Prince Roland had no appreciation for traditional dramas, which was further reinforced by his previous refusal. Barav guessed that Roland did not want to annoy him, so he had waited until now to let Roland read the letter from the master of drama. Roland could tell that the old director held Cajun Fells in high esteem. Not only him, but also Marjorie, Chief Knight, and all the people from the old King's City seemed to have a good impression of this master of drama. In that case, Roland decided to take a look. Roland shrugged and quickly skimmed through the letter. The content of the letter was about the production method of the magic movie. Cajun wrote in the letter that he first asked the Starflower troupe for the answer, but May told him that the troupe was only responsible for the performance, and that it was the Witch Union who transformed the magic movie into an illusion. She could not tell him the specific method because it might be confidential. Roland then wrote another letter to the Witch Union, but it was quickly rejected with the reason that the Castle District did not accept direct mail. In the end, he had to go to the administrative office again, hoping to ask the questions on his behalf. Cajun's perseverance surprised Roland a little. Generally speaking, the more a leader of an industry was, the more devastated he would be when the industry was subverted. However, Cajun's words were full of desire for the magic movie, and he did not seem frustrated at all. "I see," Roland said after a moment of silence. "I'll reply to him in this letter." However, both the drama and the magic movie were tools for Neverwinter's publicity. Roland did not have the time or energy to shoot a cliched palace love story, so he might as well tell Cajun directly to give up on the idea. "Yes, Your Majesty." Bear heaved a sigh of relief. "What about the other letter?" Roland asked as he opened the envelope. Since it was addressed to the administrative office, the old director should have screened it in advance. "It's from a businessman who calls himself Victor Lothar." "Finally, it's not a trade request for bags and popcorn?" Roland chuckled. "Yes, he wants to buy cotton." Berev nodded. "Cotton?" Roland's hand stopped involuntarily. Neverwinter doesn't produce this kind of stuff. Chapter 1044. As the greatest contributor to the increase in grain production, Leaf's story had long been written in the form of a comic strip in the Witch Diaries. This kind of booklet was sold in the convenience market, so it was not unusual for foreign merchants to know of her existence. However, he was the first one who specifically requested to cooperate with a witch. Unlike the adventurous fjords, the four kingdoms on the mainland were more influenced by the church, and had a much deeper prejudice against witches. Now that someone was willing to take the initiative to contact a witch, Roland was also a little interested. After reading the letter, he touched his chin and said, "From the Kingdom of Dawn. You should know his address, right?" "Yes," Berev said. "He has a record in the administrative office. I also asked Lady Scrolls to check his tax records and found that they dated back 6 years. But at that time, his business was mainly to buy raw gemstones and jewelry, and occasionally some furs, which had nothing to do with cotton." Interesting. Roland knew very well how simple the tax system of this era was. It completely depended on the tax collector to record the tax. After a long time, even the tax collector could not calculate it clearly, let alone verify it. In addition, it was easy to deal with the permanent property owners. After all, the land was there and could not run away. However, frequent merchants had many ways to avoid the exploitation of the local lord. Keeping a tax record meant that the other party was honest and trustworthy, which was a rare quality among the merchants. "Call Victor to the castle." He put down the letter and said, "I want to talk to him alone." "Yes, Your Majesty." Roland soon met the merchant in the reception hall. He indeed had the characteristics of a person from the Kingdom of Dawn. Like Andrea, he had light blonde hair. His facial features were upper class, and his skin was well maintained. His gestures were completely aristocratic, and his etiquette was just right. At first glance, one could tell that he came from a rich family. It was hard to imagine that such a person needed to travel between the two countries to make a living. Even if it was a large trade, he could have trusted his subordinates to handle it instead of choosing to do it himself. After all, in this era, no matter how rich one was, long-distance travel was not an easy life. The merchant also appropriately explained that it was a family dispute. In order to avoid being bullied by his elder brother, and to prove his ability, he had no choice but to leave his hometown and come to Grey Castle to run his business. Although this part of the description was rather vague, Roland did not continue asking. No matter what, It was someone else's private matter, and he wasn't very interested. Nightingale's lack of reaction meant that the merchant wasn't lying. After listening to the introduction, Roland went straight to the point. You want Leaf to cultivate high-yield cotton seeds, but your ultimate goal is to build a brand new clothing store and promote it to the whole kingdom with the advantage of low prices and high quality. This was also one of the reasons why he decided to summon Victor. It was not that his imagination was too rich, but it was written at the end of the letter. It was as if someone had submitted a business plan with a target of raising 1 billion renminbi, and they were only short of 500 renminbi. Not only Grey Castle Kingdom, the merchant said, nodding. I've calculated the price. Even if the final product is shipped to the Kingdom of Dawn, it will still be competitive. Selling at a low price was indeed a magic weapon to seize the market, but this was not an easy thing to achieve. How can you guarantee that it will be of high quality and low price? First of all, I need special cotton, Your Majesty, Victor said excitedly. Since Miss Leaf can cultivate golden wheat with 3 times the yield, I think she can also triple the yield of cotton. If the price of raw materials can be lowered to 1/3 of the current price, then clothes will also be much cheaper. Roland could not help but laugh. This logic seemed impeccable, but when he thought about it carefully, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. High-yield cotton was not a difficult thing for Leaf. With the support of the vast magic power of the Heart of Forest, she could further shorten the cultivation time. The problem was that the grain price was so low because it was stable, not because it could not be sold at a high price. It would be a big problem if people could not afford to eat, but cotton was not like that. There were hemp, coarse cloth, and animal skins in front of it. Well, even if Leaf can really triple the yield of cotton, why don't I sell it to other merchants for triple the price instead of selling it to you at a low price? Because I can help you save a lot of initial investment and provide more than 2,000 jobs. Victor did not pause at all. In addition, you can receive endless and generous taxes, and the people can also benefit from it. You don't have to worry about all this. Just leave it to me. Roland had to admit that this extremely modernized answer surprised him once again. After a while he said, "These words. You read them in the newspaper?" "And I carefully read every publicity announcement in Neverwinter. Although some of the words are a little hard to pronounce at first, they really let me see the significance of business from another aspect." Victor put his hand on his chest and said, "If it were another lord, such a proposal of lowering the price would only drive me out. But if it's you, I think it's possible. This is a novel way of flattery. If I drive him out now, won't I become the other lord that he mentioned?" Roland slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said, "Then tell me your plan." Then Victor talked nonstop for nearly an hour. Obviously, he was well prepared in advance. His idea was not complicated. In short, it was to build a business system that integrated planting, weaving, and sales. The Lothar family had a long history of making clothes, so it was not a problem for them to have experience and technology. As long as the project was officially launched, it would soon be effective. Of course, anyone could make a big deal out of it. The reason why Roland kept listening was that he had considered many details. Neverwinter was not suitable for planting cotton, so this part of the industry, together with the textile production, would be concentrated in the Southern Territory. The Southern Territory had abundant sunshine and a relatively high temperature all year round. At the same time, the Sand Nation would also bring a large number of laborers. All aspects of the conditions were very suitable. The sewing and garment departments were set up in Neverwinter, which had a higher purchasing power. In the early stage, whether it was the rental of land, the recruitment of planters, or the investment of textile factories and equipment, all were borne by Victor, so Neverwinter did not have to bear any risks. In addition to providing high-yield seeds, the whole process was in a positive state. In addition, because cotton only had a single use, it was easy to estimate the output from the purchase quantity. Therefore, the tax was very convenient, which would reduce the burden on both sides. Among these details, there were 2 that Roland was interested in. First, the high-efficiency spinning tools that Victor had mentioned could handle the processing of cotton with 3 times the output. Second, The Lothar family had a group of experienced tailors who often designed clothes for the nobles in the city of Glow, so the finished products would be popular among the people. Victor also admitted that he had come up with this idea after watching The Wolf Princess and finding that the people of Neverwinter were still very simple in their clothes, which was not the style that the king's city should have. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.